Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Stand Up Speakeasy. I am your host, Srethne, and every episode I bring a comic from all over the country, and I'm really excited to have this guest on because um, five comedians from his city nominated him to be on the show, and he must be a really big deal, like much respect and much loved in Chicago, which is fantastic. So he's a stand-up comic, a writer, and a podcaster. Coming to the stage is Prateek Srivastava. I believe I got it right. I practiced on when we were off record, so Pratik, hopefully I did justice, but it's uh it's awesome. My name is hard to pronounce for people too. They call it Sarith, and I'm like, there's no extra E, so I'm just
I
like,
was
oh.
I was gonna I was gonna say like you dance in the tough name camp. You know the struggle a little bit too. It's at some point, every intro, every time you try to help somebody figure out how to say it, it's fine. But then also if they still screw it up, you're like, like how disappointed can you get every time? Like I would lose my hair if I got mad at everybody that butchered my name. You know what I mean? So at some point it like you build a callus to it, right? And you get desensitized to it. But then that other like there are those people like, and I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about like people who are like, no, I really want to get your name correctly, and like they get excited about it, right? Like they're like trying to finish that last level of Super Mario. Like, no, I want to crush the name, and like they still kind of screw it up, and then you're like, we don't get too disappointed, right? And they're like, why aren't you more disappointed? Why don't you care? And it's like you don't know the hell that I've been through, all right? Like it's like talking to like a Vietnam War veteran. You've the horrors that you and I have been through with our name. It's like it's tough. We can't get a name at Disney World. We can't get keychains or anything. Like no, it's a struggle.
Absolutely, so true, so true. I mean, I can't find my name on anything, so I'm like,
Anything, right? And then they'll be like, "Oh, can you like go by a nickname?" And it's like, "No, I don't do no nicknames, all right? Like I feel like if I took on a nickname, it would be like they win. You know what I mean? So like no nicknames. I will power through the hard name, and I feel like you're doing that too. So the struggle is real.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Man, I'm so glad, like, being like a fellow Asian comic is just like, man, there's like not enough of us, but I'm like, when there's a few of us, like, they love us. It's like, I'm loved in Florida, you're loved in Chicago. It's like, it's perfect. So it's fantastic.
And it's great to connect with other like Asian comics too. And like sometimes, I'm sure you've done like, those they do like, especially in May. May is Asian American History Month. Like there'll be like theme shows that you'll be on. And obviously on paper, doing a theme show, you might be like, it's a theme show. But I have to say, some of the Asian theme shows that I've done have been wonderful. The crowds have been super supportive because, like you said, there's this cathartic release of like, oh, I get to see people who look like me on stage. And so you feel the support of the crowd, and it's made me appreciate those theme shows even more the more I do them. So it's interesting because at first I was like, do I really want to do a racially themed show? But I've come to appreciate them more the more I do them. So I'm sure you're the same way.
So true. And it's so true. And it's like, I tried this, like, I got selected for the Crazy Woke Asians Solo Performance Festival in Santa Monica, and it got
Yeah.
postponed because of COVID, but they're pushing it back for this year. So I'm like, cool, I can be amongst a lot of Asian comics because there's just, like I said, there's just a few of us. I mean, people know Russell Peters and Joe Coy and stuff, but
Exactly.
nobody knows us. And it's like, and that's what I'm using this for. It's like, just shining the light on us and other comics that are from different backgrounds because everyone has like the same guests all the time that are famous comedians, and I'm like, what about us? And I'm like, so I'm putting everyone that's like us on this show.
We out there, Surratt. We're out there, and even with Asian audiences too, things have gotten better for sure. But I think there was a period there where like, you meet, South Asian or someone from whatever background, they're like, oh, cool, you do comedy. Do you know Russell Peters? Do you know Hassan Minaj? Like they just act like we know everybody, which is, I mean, it's kind of a compliment too, but then it's also you want to tell them that, there's comedy and performers outside of the TV bubble. There is an independent scene for Asian shows. So that's why, like I said, I look back on those Asian shows and I was like, oh, theme shows, but I continue to do them and I continue to look forward to them because they're building that relationship with Asian audiences so that they can say like, hey, it's not just, Joe Coy, Russell Peters, people who've been on TV. There's an independent scene as well. So, yeah, it's good to keep doing them and it's good to keep, meeting, and now like sometimes, well, not now because of COVID, but like, towards like those last few years when I was starting to tour and I would go to like a Reading, Pennsylvania, for example, there would be 1 to 2 like Indian people in the crowd or Asian people in the crowd. And it was because they didn't have a lot of Asian comics in Reading, Pennsylvania. They didn't even have a lot of Asian people in Reading, Pennsylvania. So I think for them, it was this excitement. And so to me, that's the exciting thing that, hopefully we can get back to once, touring and regular performing comes back again, is like, going to these markets where there aren't a lot of Asian people and Asian performers, and being able to reach those people that live there and bring something exciting to them, for sure.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. And man, it's hopefully, what was the comedy scene like before the COVID shut down in Chicago? I mean, I performed there twice at the Red Line Tap when it was still open and the Noise Theater. So I had a piece of it, and it was just such an amazing feeling at both venues. But for you, what was it like for you?
So I've gotten to see like Chicago comedy and arts just in general in Chicago evolve over the years, and it's definitely in these last few years pre-COVID, it was great. You had your major clubs. You had Zany's Comedy Club, which is kind of like the OG comedy club of the Midwest. They've been around since, don't quote me on I believe it's the early 70s they've been around. They have a Nashville location as well, but their foothold is in the Midwest. They're kind of like the OG. The Chicago Zany's location is fascinating because it's low ceilings, it's super intimate, which is great for comedy. I always love low ceiling rooms. It's not necessarily great for COVID socially distancing shows because it's hard to be intimate in a room like that, but the stage is really high in the Zanies in Chicago location. So it's like a high stage, low ceiling. And I figured out why. It used to be an old strip club. That's why the stage is so elevated. But performers, we need elevation when we perform, so it's the perfect room for comedy. So yeah, you have Zanies. Then you had the Laugh Factory, which came in, I believe, I want to say 2012, 2013. They moved in. They took over. The Laugh Factory took over for an old club in Chicago that was called the Lake Shore Theater, which was run by Paul Provenza, who's big on like JFL and just like a very prolific performer and writer. He was the director, producer of that Aristocats was the Disney movie that's canceled now, but Aristocrats, the movie about the dirty joke that comics used to tell. So Paul Provenza is a very prolific producer, and he put money into the Lake Shore Theater. And that's actually how I got started doing stand-up. I was a broke college student in Chicago, and the Lake Shore Theater was this foothold where I was like, oh, if you have a college ID, you get in for free. I'm like, hey, I need free things to do. I'm a college performer. So I would go there. And this was, I want to say 2008, 2009, when I was going to these shows, when I was still a college student. So, back then, the local talent in Chicago, the local comedians who weren't famous yet, they were just coming up, were TJ Miller, Hannibal Buress, Kumail Nanjiani, Kyle Kinane, people who are now household names. They were just like up and comers back then. That was the local talent in Chicago back then. Then throw in the out of town headliners that were coming in. Like I got to see Mark Maron before he was popular. Like I remember seeing Mark Maron in 2008. He was like, hey, I have this podcast that I just started and I don't know what's going to happen with it. And it might end. And it was called WTF. And now WTF is a household name podcast or whatever. But I remember him pitching WTF being like, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with it. We're just like taping in my garage. I remember seeing Reggie Watts before Reggie Watts was known. So they were literally giving out tickets. Reggie Watts stood outside on the corner of Broadway and Belmont Avenue saying, hey, come see me perform. And this is in 2008 when no one knew who the hell he was. So to see that and to see now where all these people have grown, it's fascinating. And so the Laugh Factory took over that location. So for me, whenever I get a chance to perform at the Laugh Factory, it's very sentimental and heartwarming because that location is where I got to see live stand-up kind of cultivate. And that's really what motivated me to do stand-up, was watching, comedians live in front of an audience, because watching stand-up on like Netflix or TV is great. I'm not taking anything away from that, listen, watch, but there's something about the live essence of performing, being in a room with other human beings that you don't really know. We're all just a collection of cells for that, 90 minutes or whatever, laughing and cathartically having an emotional reaction to the performer on stage. And it changed my life. So I'm always very, sentimental when I get to perform at the Laugh Factory, being that that's the location of the old Lakeshore Theater. So that's just two of the major clubs. Then we also have Comedy Bar. And then if you go in the suburbs, you have the Improv in Schaumburg, it's a Chicago Improv, but it's in the city as well. There's Comedy Shrine in Aurora, which is another suburb of Chicago. So it's such a great city because you get the best of both worlds. You have your clubs that are doing very well. Then you also have the independent scene. You have places like Comedians You Should Know, which is an independent comedy room that started Don't quote me on the exact year. I'm not like a comedy historian. I just know a lot of these things, but they were around like I want to say they started 2008, 2009. They've been they're like they to me, Comedians You Know is one of the best independently produced shows in the country because they started in Chicago, and then I think pre-COVID they still had their New York location. They had a location at a bowling alley in New York, and then they had a show at the Hollywood Improv. They had a show in one of their rooms. Up until obviously COVID kind of prevented some of that from continuing. But that's a great independent room. You have the Lincoln Lodge. So you have this marriage of club rooms. You have a marriage of independent rooms, and then you mentioned Surrett that you performed at the Annoyance Theater. You also had this growing emergence in variety shows at improv and sketch theaters that were providing another opportunity for stand-ups as well. And I'll say I think some comics maybe were turned off to the idea of performing for improv crowds, but I relish the opportunity, especially in the last few years leading up to COVID. I relish the opportunity to perform in improv theaters, doing stand-up in improv theaters, because it's a different type of audience. Is it an uphill battle trying to get the audience on your side? Sure. If they just watch 20 minutes of improv, you have to reprogram the audience to what you're trying to do. If the audience is, let's take music, for example. If an audience is listening to classical concert violin for 30 minutes, and then you come on playing death metal guitar, they're going to have to get accustomed to what your music is. So the same way, if they're watching an improv Herald scene for 30 minutes, you come on, you start talking about, Tinder jokes, they're going to need to be reprogrammed a little bit, and they need to be reaccustomed to what you're doing. So you ease in with, easier material for them to digest. You ease in maybe with crowd work, you make it easier for them. But for me, that was the challenge of performing. That's what's exciting to me is I'm trying to perform for audiences in a different way every time. Are my jokes going to be somewhat similar each time? They might be similar in theme, but I'm still reprogramming and re-delivering those jokes in a way that's fresh to that particular audience. And to me, that's, to talk about Chicago and Chicago comedy, to me, that's one of the beauties of a place like Chicago, because there's so many variety of neighborhoods, because of the variety of clubs, because of the variety of independent rooms, because of the variety of improv theaters. You can, on a given night, you can go from performing for Laugh Factory crowd to performing at a comic book shop for 20 people to performing at an improv theater at midnight for, 10 couples that are making out in the back. Like the variety and the diversity of audiences too is what was so exciting about Chicago. And that was where we were headed until, COVID.
Indeed. And I can't wait to go back because I plan on living in like 4 different cities in the central time zone, and Chicago is one of them. So I'm thinking Chicago, St. Louis, New Orleans, and Austin, and then going back home to Colorado because I just love those cities. And stand-up is just, from what the interviews that I've had with comedians so far in each city, it's just, man, it's just amazing to hear all that.
And those are all great cities. Austin's a great city. Colorado, I've not gotten to perform in Colorado, but I know they're doing great things out there. I believe David Rodriguez, who's a comedian, he's now owning his own club, Comedy Fort. So shout out to the Comedy Fort in Colorado. New Orleans, I know, is a great town. I had New Orleans booked in May of 2020, and then I wasn't able to do it before COVID. But yeah, New Orleans is a really exciting city too to perform in. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you go to all these places. They're all great cities. You picked the pick of the litter.
Absolutely, indeed. And so, speaking of all those cities in Reading, Pennsylvania, and you performing in front of those two Indian folks, you're a national touring comedian. What are some of your favorite venues that you performed at from coast to coast?
I mean, I think one of my favorite places is Caroline's Comedy Club in New York City. That was part of that Reading, Pennsylvania tour. We did a tour. It was me and a few other comedians. We called it the East Meets Midwest tour. It was 2 comics from the Midwest, 2 comics from New York. So we were like, how do we route this tour properly? So I was like, you guys come here. Let's go from Chicago and let's work our way back east. So we started in Chicago. We did a couple kickoff shows in Chicago. Then we did Reading, Pennsylvania, which was it was this bowling alley, but we found like their party room. They had like a really nice private event room that could seat like, 150 people. And the best part was they had like metal in the walls to keep it like soundproof. So you couldn't hear the bowling that was going on in the other room, but it was also a bowling alley. So, and I'm a big fan of wings. Bowling alleys have some of the best wings ever. So food was good. You had good pub food. you had 150 people in this party private room in the bowling alley in Reading, Pennsylvania, and it was wonderful. So that was great. Then we went to Boston. I believe we did like a drag cabaret venue in Boston to perform at, where they had like drag karaoke afterwards. So that was great. So we had a good built-in audience there, and then we did our show beforehand. So that was great. And then the final stop of the tour in New York was at Caroline's Comedy Club in New York City, and that's I've gotten to do. We did Caroline's in 2019 as well. We did a modified version of that tour with a few different performers. But so yeah, I got to do Caroline's 2018, 2019, and then we would have essentially done it in 2020 if, COVID hadn't happened. So I would have gone for the hat trick at Caroline's. But that's really, like, outside of Chicago, that's one of my favorite places to perform at. Because it's just it's not like a typical club room. It's in the round, it's a there's audiences surrounding you on all sides. So I think that's kind of a creative kind of layout for a room as well. You're performing, but you also have to keep looking around. You have to look over here, then look over here, and look over here, because it's you're being surrounded by audiences as well. And also it's in the heart of Times Square, so you're getting a variety of people in that crowd too. And I think that's something that's very important to me, Sareth. I'm sure it's important to you. Is you don't want to just perform for one type of group of people. You want to perform for a good cross section of people, because that's what America is. It's a cross section of America. And I think, Times Square, it's tourists, blah, 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 but you're getting a good cross section of everybody. We were obviously, all 4 comedians on that tour were of South Asian descent, but we were trying to just market to beyond South Asians as well. So we had a good mix of, we had South Asians in the crowd. We had East Asians in the crowd. We had a lot of Latino people in the crowd. We had a good mix of, we had some international fans as well. We had a couple visiting to us from Russia who was at that show. And that to me is exciting as well, is getting to perform for international, crowds, because it's going to be a while before we can, go overseas. But to be able to have somebody from, Belarus in your show and find out that your jokes translate to somebody who maybe English isn't their first language, I think that's wonderful. To me, isn't that what comedy is about? I know that sounds kind of sappy, and I'm sure if comics are listening and watching this, like, Prateek's just waxing poetic. I think that's important, sir. We gotta wax poetic sometimes. And to me, what is poetic is the fact that someone who doesn't speak English as their first language, they're using humor to maybe even understand American culture even more. If someone is able to assimilate to America using my jokes about pro wrestling, to me, that's a greater high than any paycheck, in my personal opinion.
Absolutely. And you're so right about comedy. It's like, and it goes for music too, and it just unites people like nothing else. And it's so neat that to find out that you're a pro wrestling fan, because I'm a pro wrestling fan too. So
there you go. Well, who's your favorite wrestler, Sarah?
All time Sabu, like hands down.
That's awesome. Yeah. I was just watching an interview with Sabu, actually. EC Dub, there you go.
Absolutely. How about yours? Who's your favorite wrestler?
I think all time, I gotta go with the classic answer. I think I gotta go with Stone Cold as my all time favorite. But who's also up there, who he gets some mainstream love, but not a lot, is Mick Foley. I think Mick Foley, another like Sabu, hardcore legend as well. I don't think and what's funny about Mick Foley now is he's doing kind of stand up. Like, I think he was kind of part of this, like, growing trend of, like, performers who weren't necessarily comics, but performing at clubs. You had like Jake the Snake Roberts, who would do like these. And I was actually just talking to my one comedian friend as well about it, that like when Jake the Snake would do like a show at Zany's, it was more like storytelling. It wasn't even necessarily traditional stand-up. So he was kind of breaking the mold of what a stand-up show could be at a club. So to me, I know some comics are always like, oh, why are these like non-comics doing clubs? Why is Steve-O from Jackass performing? But to me, you need those people, because those people are what keeps the lights on at the club, because those shows are always packed out. Whether you have a sitcom star, what's his name from Saved by the Bell, Screech, Dustin Diamond, he passed away. But, I was at a club where he was performing. I wasn't on the show that night, but I just wanted to watch and see what he was doing. It was standing room only, the clubs need those, you can call them novelty acts, you can call them whatever you want. They're definitely maybe not necessarily a classically trained stand-up, but those acts do well for the club. And what is more beneficial to me is, and that's obviously based on performers, if a Steve-O or if a Dustin Diamond or if a Jake the Snake brings on a local comic to perform before them, so then that local comic, in the words of wrestling, do they get the rub from the big person? Do they get that, come up from that big time crowd? That's what's important too. Is Jake the Snake Roberts bringing on an opener? I know he's used a few local people to bring up, and I think that's important too, because that local person, if they were to do a regular weekend, it might be, busy on Saturday at 7, but then the Saturday at 10 p.m. show might be not as full. So I think it's beneficial to open for those people. And I think you need those, those wrestling stand-up turn stand-up acts. You need those as well. And I know Mick Foley, I don't know about you, but I would love to open for Mick Foley or Jake the Snake. I would, just as a wrestling fan there, like, yeah, okay, I only get to do 3-4 minutes of the wrestling material, whatever, but that's fine. I will happily take a backseat. Like for me, if I got to open for them, it wouldn't even be about the money. It would be about the experience and the story of getting to perform for them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, so true. And my next stage production is like two pieces of storytelling, and the third act is my stand up. So it's called Stories on Sunset, and I got picked for the Orlando Fringe and so festival, and they're celebrating 30 years. I'm so excited. So I can totally relate to Jake the Snake on that one.
Yeah.
And so being like, Saturday night main event was on NBC.
I remember that. Yeah.
Saved by the Bell was on NBC too, and you were selected as a four-time regional finalist for NBC's Stand Up Talent Search. And how did that, like, what was like some of your favorite memories from that?
Yeah, that's Stand Up NBC is a cool opportunity. That started 2014. They were doing their normal cattle calls where they they're obviously looking for diverse talent, but anybody can apply. It's not just, I know I remember having this conversation with some white comics like, "Oh, I can't apply." I'm like, I think you definitely should apply because they are looking for everybody. They might have a slight stance towards diverse talent, but they're really looking at anybody. All are encouraged to apply. So how it started for me was 2014. They were doing their cattle call audition, but it's different than other cattle calls where they're only looking at 100 people. They were only going to see the first 100 people that showed up. And in 2014, they were doing it out of a club that's unfortunately no longer around. It was called Jokes and Notes. It's on the south side of Chicago. Shout out to Mariella Lindsay. She's a fantastic producer talent. She was also a producer for a venue back in the early 90s called All Jokes Aside. And there's a great documentary about All Jokes Aside. That's where D.L. Hughley and Bernie Mac and, Jamie Foxx and Martin Lawrence and all these people they had their come up, as Black performers performing on the south side of Chicago. So it was a great club. And Jokes and Notes was now kind of the second incarnation of that club, if you will. So they were doing stand-up NBC there, and they were doing the 100 people cattle call. And I remember I literally just moved to the city from the suburbs the night before. I just moved into my apartment. I didn't even have a bed at that point. I was staying on my roommate's couch in the living room. I was sleeping on that. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll get up at 5 a.m. I'll take the train. I was in the Uptown neighborhood, which is like north side of Chicago, like even north of Wrigley Field. And I was going to take that train, take the Green Line and go all the way down to the south side of Chicago. We're talking hour to 45-minute train ride. And I'll let's get up at 4 a.m. and I'll make sure I'll get there to be in that top 100, And then at 5 a.m., my alarm goes off. And I had that moment that we've all probably had before where we're just like, I'm tired. I'm not feeling this. Nothing's going to happen. That slight imposter syndrome, if you will. And I was about to not go. And I remember this comedian a good friend of mine who's been on the show, I believe, Anthony Bonazzo, he's been on the show. He texted me and was like, yo, there's only like 55, 65 people maybe in line. You should come down here. I'm like, man, I'm tired. I don't think I'm going to make it. He's like, no, really. Get your ass out of bed and take the train and come down. And I was like, all right, I'll go down there. I take the train, I get down there. And had I waited, I would have probably not made it because when I get there, I'm 98 out of 100. I was like, I just made it into the cutoff. So I'm waiting in line. And what they decided to do was, which I don't think a lot of these sort of talent audition things do, because I've waited in line for other things. Like I know In Living Color had done a cold cattle call audition thing at the Laugh Factory, and they had done it like in February when it was like the dead of winter, and they weren't cutting it off. They were taking like everybody. So like the line stretched on the block. But what Stand Up NBC did that was good that In Living Color auditions didn't do, or last comic standing auditions didn't do, is Stand Up NBC. They did a thing where they said, okay, we're going to give everybody a number in the line. So you got your number, like a deli counter number, and they said, okay, we're gonna bring you back in heats, groups of 25 people. So you could actually go and use the restroom and come back when you're your quadrant, your 25 group of people quadrant was called. So you had like a little bit of downtime to breathe or get some food, go to the bathroom or something. And I thought that was really clever that they did that, and that made it somewhat helpful. So I was in a group with a friend of mine named Chris, and so we go. I think we go. I think we go to like a diner or something and eat. We come back for our quadrant heat, and they tell us, okay, your quadrant will wait in the lobby of the club, and we will kind of call you in groups of 5, and you have 30 seconds to perform, not a minute. You have 30 seconds to perform in this cold room. So we each go in. I'm thinking 30 seconds. Okay, that's like, I was like, do I go for like one joke in this 30 seconds, or do I try to, speed through like one or two one-liners? And I'm like, you know what? Let's go for more. Let's try to give him more jokes. So I talk like a mile a minute. I think I get through like 3 one-liners in 30 seconds. So I'm really doing like a 10-second one-liner. A one-liner that's normally a minute, I've condensed to 10 seconds, just like speeding through. I think I get through like 3 one-liners in that 30-second interval. And then it was just like a blur. Like, you do that 30 seconds. And again, I don't know how many people might know this, but those rooms are literally just the casting people from NBC. And then there's a booker there who books for like the Tonight Show. And then there's like one other executive from NBC. There's 5 people in this empty club. So imagine performing at a club for 5 people up front and center. There's no laughter in the room. You will not feel like you're in a performance at all. It's a very cold room. And that's the point of it. They want you to kind of be under that pressure. So I did the 5-person 30-second quadrant, and then I leave, and they're like, okay, we'll make the announcement. Kind of like, I don't know if you ever audition. You ever try it for basketball? They'll post like the names on like a clipboard. So they did like, we'll post the names on the clipboard at 2 p.m. and then come back at 2:30 for the not quarterfinals, but the callback auditions, if you will. So come back at 2. Somehow my name's on there, and Sareth, guess what? They spelled my name correctly. So I was like, whoa, I was impressed on two ends. Like, whoa, you got my name spelled correctly, and it's on there, because I wasn't expecting that. I went in with no expectations. All right. I was sleeping on my roommate's couch. I just moved to the city, and I was almost not even going to go. So it was very surprising. So come back at 2:30, 2:40, and they do the callback auditions. What I find out is there were comics in that callback audition that didn't even audition the first round. They bypassed. They got a bye for the first round. And these are people that, the club had booked in particular. They were like the favorites. They got a bypass. So what was only supposed to be like, 4 or 5 people from that 100 people, they were now 20 people auditioning in this callback. People who, and 15 of those people hadn't even been waiting in line all day. So they were fresh. They were tired. So literally, and that round was only one, and that round was going to be 1 minute. So now you had 1 minute to audition, and went from 30 seconds to 1 minute. So when I realized that there were going to be 20 people in this round, not just 5 or 6 people, I'm like, oh, fuck. That's when I got like that tunnel vision, like a boxer normally gets. I'm like, you know what? Just throw out your craziest jokes. I think I did one joke from that 30-second audition, but I did a lot of just other high energy stuff. And I'm like, you know what? Just throw out the craziest stuff, because I have to stand out. There are people at this audition who've been on TV shows or whatever. So I'm like, I really need to do something to set myself apart. So I did like just 1 minute of balls to wall energy material. And then it was like, okay, great. Do your set. And the other thing too is they run through the running order for this like 20-person callback audition. They say it up top. The woman comes up. Her name is Janda. She's a very lovely woman. She works for NBC still. She's part of this talent and inclusion initiative that NBC has. Shout out to Jandis. She's wonderful. So she goes up. She tries to be like the MC, but she's like an executive. So she's not like a comedian, right? But she's like the MC. And she's like, hey, everybody, support your fellow performers in this callback audition. She's trying to get everybody the lay of the land. She runs through the order of the comics, but that's it. That's your only time to remember the order. So what I did is I remembered the person that was right before me, because then they'll just go through, and you stand in the wings, like off stage, and you just kind of run up as soon as they call your name. You go up, you do your 1 minute, and you say, thank you, my name is so-and-so, and you say your name, you run off, and then she calls the next person off stage. So it's kind of like a round robin type of situation. And again, the only audience is the 15 to 20 people performing, comics who, let's be honest, are comics going to be laughing for everybody in that room? No, because they want to laugh for themselves. So you have that, and then you have the 4 or 5 executives. So it's not the most inviting room. There might be 15 to 20 people there, but everybody's gunning for themselves. They're on their phone. They're doing all this nonsense. So it's a weird room to perform in. So I just remembered I wrote down the person's name that I'm right before. I got ready, and I just run on stage, grab the mic, do my 1 minute, and it felt like a blur. I did it, and I got off of it, and it was just like, oh, okay, it was like, okay, I did it. I did the best I could, but we'll see what happens. There are clearly some people on here that are better than me. So I didn't really put too much pressure on myself. That was the main thing. I didn't put a lot of pressure on myself. I just kind of went through it, didn't think about it. And then when I went back, I remember doing a show that night at a record store. I'm just like, oh yeah, I auditioned for this thing. We'll see what happened. Now, I remember it was, you did the audition and then you did the callback around 3, whatever it was. And then the evening, they said that, okay, you'll get an email and you'll get a hotline number. And you're supposed to call that hotline at like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and they will announce the names of the people in that hotline. So I remember calling it right before I'm about to go on stage for that record store independent show or whatever. I hear my name, I'm like, oh, I'm performing tomorrow night. Fuck. So I remember like that record store set was good, but like it was definitely like I was thinking about that in the back of my mind, like, oh, I don't want to put too much pressure on myself or whatever. So it was definitely this feeling of like, being thrust into the deep end of a swimming pool. It's like, okay, now we're in it now. We're in it to win it. So I remember Anthony Bonazzo was also actually who I mentioned earlier. He made it to that final showcase that was going to be on Sunday. So that final showcase on Sunday, I think they took 8 people total. So you had, a few people from the original waiting in line. Then you had a few people from that, people who bypassed it. And together they called together and they do an 8-person show. Everybody does about 6 to 7 minutes. There is a full crowd for this show. They market it as like a best of stand-up NBC showcase. The execs are in the crowd too for that. Tone Bell, who's a very talented comedian, he had worked with stand-up NBC before, so he was the MC of the night. So his job was to go up and pronounce everybody's name. And I still have this footage somewhere. I maybe I'll put it up or something on YouTube. But the footage is literally Tone Bell being like, give it up for. Okay, how do you say his name? That's literally. So Jandis from off stage goes, Prateek, and he goes, okay, it's Prateek. And she's like, no, it's Prateek. And he's like, Prateek, all right, just get up here. So my first ever intro for the stand-up NBC showcase is Tone Bell yelling off stage my name. So yeah, I have that footage somewhere because what they do is also they record. They don't let you record those sets. They have somebody there recording it for you, and then they send you that footage after you do it. But again, it was a great opportunity that first time around to be able to perform for the stand-up NBC executives. These are people that I still keep in contact with. And what led to that was then I did not have to wait in line the following year because then they moved from Jokes and Notes to Laugh Factory, and they've been doing them at Laugh Factory ever since. And that was really fun to be able to move from Jokes and Notes and doing them at the Laugh Factory, a room that I already feel sentimental in. And those next few years I got to showcase for them, those were always fun because it became part of a weekend. Because what they also started doing, Sareth, is they added at Second City, again, that marriage of stand-up and improv, performing stand-up and an improv theater that we talked about earlier. They started doing a full-on NBC showcase, like casting and audition festival there called the NBC Breakout Festival. So those executives would be coming there around Thursday or Friday of that week, and they'd stay till Sunday. And Sunday night would be the stand-up NBC showcase. So it was basically a full weekend of NBC talent executives and NBC casting people being in Chicago, giving Chicago the industry sort of star treatment that it deserves. And so it became this really cool weekend to be able to do NBC Breakout Festival, Second City on like a Saturday night. And then Sunday night, be like, oh, hey, come see me at the Sunday stand-up NBC show. And I remember one year I had done the Breakout Festival on Sunday, and then they had a Breakout Festival. They had like an extra show on Sunday, and I had to be like, No, but I got asked to do the stand up NBC show Laugh Factory, so I literally had a choice. So that's like, do I do the casting one, or do the casting one? And I'm like, I literally had to like ask some people, like, yo, are there going to be like different casting people at the Second City show, or which show should I do? Who's going to have more executives? And they're just like, just do the stand up NBC show because the main executives for stand up NBC will be there. So, but it came down to like a Sophie's choice, if you will, like which show am I supposed to do? So yeah, I look back fondly on those shows. Yeah, they do have an extra round that they do in November where you get to perform in LA. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make those, but I still appreciate the experiences of the stand up NBC showcases, because I think comics and performers in general, you need to be able to learn how to showcase. You need to learn how to audition. That's learning to audition is a skill that's different than performing at a bar show for 12 people. It's you got to be in a different mindset. You have to know what jokes work. Like most of my jokes, if you listen to any of my jokes, there might be an extra curse word in there, there might be an extra tag in there, and you have to learn how to not clean up from a censorship standpoint. You have to learn how to keep that set tight, because there are people that are going to be at that NBC showcase who, they're talent bookers for Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. There might be someone from Conan there. There might be a casting executive there who might want you to, come read a monologue when they want to cast you in like Chicago Fire or something. So they want to be able to see a tight set from you. They don't want to see you go up there and meander for 5 to 6 minutes. They don't want to see you go up there and be like, oh yeah, so what else I'm going to talk about? And then you look at your phone or something. They don't want to see that. They want to see polish. They want to see a pristine and tight set. And here's another thing that comics don't even, I feel like I'm going on a TED talk now, but a lot of comics don't think about casting directors coming to a stand-up show. Let me tell you, I've had a chance to audition for shows, like shows that have been on Comedy Central. And sometimes they'll be like, oh, you do stand-up? Can you do stand-up for us now? Like, even after I've done my monologue or whatever, they'll give you like acting sides or something where you have to, act out like a scene with like an imaginary person off camera or whatever. That's acting sides. But if they find out in your resume you do stand-up, they'll ask you to do stand-up at this audition where there's only 2 casting people there, but they want to see you do stand-up right there. I remember I had to do something for Comedy Central, and they were casting people like, oh, you do stand-up. Can you do some jokes right now? I don't mean to put you on the spot. So what are you going to say? No, you have to go with the flow and you have to do it. So to me, doing stand-up NBC, doing NBC Breakout, doing all these things is what helped give me doing, especially those callback auditions in the empty room with 5 people in there. That's a really good skill for then, getting to do a casting session. And they're like, hey, you do stand-up. Can you do stand-up right now? You kind of have to have that 5 minutes in your back pocket that you can just pull out at will whenever you want. That you're not going to be like, oh, well, I have to be under the right conditions. It's got to be Saturday night with the lights on me and there's a full crowd. You may not always get a chance to do that tight 5 in front of a full crowd. You might have to do that on the spot. You should always have a tight 5 ready to go. And I think these stand-up NBC and breakout festival opportunities really help hone my tight 5. And I think you definitely need that, because you never know. I mean, even like obviously late night sets with stand-ups right now aren't necessarily a thing because of COVID, and you can't have an audience at the crowd right now or whatever. But some of our favorite comedians who've done late night sets, it's usually been like, oh, we found it the day before, or oh, some guest got sick and they need an extra stand-up. You don't have a lot of time to prep that late night set. It's really got to be in the back of your pocket. So to me, all of these NBC opportunities, all these casting opportunities, all these things, they're all beneficial towards that. They're all something that, it builds towards the next thing. It's like dominoes. One domino knocks off another. This casting and this, showcase audition will lead to another thing. So they're all beneficial. And that's why I look back very fondly on those auditions and those showcases. They're all great people. Again, to talk about what we talk about with diversity and inclusion, they're all geared towards diversity and inclusion, so it's a great opportunity. I look back fondly on those things.
Most definitely. Indeed. And
I feel like I haven't let you talk at all.
you're totally fine. It's so great to hear like deep stories. And that's what, these are for. It's like, the meatier the answer, the better. Because that's what a host like me looks for. And you're a podcaster too. So that's what you look for too. And so it's like, the more meat on the bones, the better the content.
It's true though, when you're a podcaster, like you know what because people, I've had guests be like, oh wow, you're a really good interview. It's really just I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of letting you, the guest, kind of, I sit back and I take a breather and let you talk, and then you find ways to gear the conversation accordingly. But yeah, that's a skill. Like a lot of comics, I think, struggle with being a good podcast host because they want to interject every time. So being a good host is about taking a step back and letting the person kind of go unhinged, if you will.
Absolutely. And you spoke of the NBC Breakout Festival and tracing it back all the way to, you performing from Chicago to Caroline's in New York City. You've also performed in festivals all over the country too, including the second NBC Breakout Festival at Second City, ZTV's Desi Comedy Festival, San Francisco's Catch Fest, World Series of Comedy, Bird City Comedy Festival, Laughter Asheville, North Carolina Festival, and the Milwaukee Comedy Festival. And what are some of your favorite memories from all those festivals that you performed at?
Those were some good times. Again, like, to talk about, especially now when you can't really travel right now. I look back and definitely, I'll be honest, there was a period in 2020 where I felt like, oh man, I didn't get to travel enough. And, I think we're all kind of in that mode of like, man, I didn't do enough in the before times, right? Like we've all had those feelings, like we need to do more. And also, sometimes it's been nice to kind of look back on all those festivals and be like, no, Prateek, you did get to do some really cool things. And so, yeah, those festivals, Laughter Asheville, that's a very prestigious festival that I literally just applied on a whim. Didn't think I would get in, but Melissa Hahn, who I still keep in contact with, she's a great producer of that festival. Shout out to Melissa Hahn. They do a great job with the Laughter Asheville Festival. That's a week-long festival. And they would even have like panels, with like stand-up bookers, club bookers, casting agents. I was unfortunately not able to stay the year I did it. I wasn't able to stay for the Saturday panel-a-thon, if you will, because I actually had to fly back to Chicago. This is a crazy story. If you want some meaty stories, here's one. But the Asheville Festival, that was sort of like a big festival credit for me. I'd applied for a lot of festivals before then, never really got in. I was just like, oh, all these festivals, we'll see what happens. I don't know if I'm ever going to get in them. So that Asheville one, I submitted a clip that I taped at a show that I used to produce. It was called Simmer Brown, which we ran that out of a venue called the Bug House Theater in Chicago, which is a black box theater, BYOB, which BYOB is a stand-up comedian's best friend. I don't know about you, but like some of those BYOB shows, like, you learn who really is a fan of comedy when they're coming to a BYOB show, because I think comedy clubs at times you'll get people there that are comedy fans, but then you'll also get some people there who are like, we're a couple and we're bored and we need something to do on a weekend. But like, if you're going to a BYOB or a black box theater, you're truly you're an aficionado of comedy. You're a connoisseur of comedy. They're like the wine tasters of comedy, So we did this black box show, and I remember taping like a good 15-minute set at that. And I was like, okay, I have a good clip that I can start using for submission to clubs and submissions to festivals. And so after Asheville, I remember I submitted it literally, I think they did like, what was it, 12 p.m. Or 12 a.m. Eastern. So like Eastern is 11 p.m. Central. So I remember like getting it in right under the dot, getting that clip in, getting that headshot in, getting the bio in. And I remember getting accepted, and I was like, okay, Asheville, North Carolina. Where is that? I had no idea where Asheville was. It's a very scenic part of North Carolina. A lot of hippies live there. It's a very liberal part of North Carolina. I mean, North Carolina in general, I think North Carolina gets this rap, being from the South, that it's, kind of a red state. I'm sure there are good parts of North Carolina that are a red state, but you also have you have the University of North Carolina. You have a lot of college towns. College towns tend to be relatively liberal, speaking. So it was a good community, very scenic. I have some pictures on my Instagram. So at Prateek Comedy, which is, I know it's scrolling all down there. But yeah, it's just a beautiful, beautiful city. And they did the festival, and I remember there were comedians there. I remember meeting Rosabud Baker there. She's a very talented performer who's been on like JFL, and she's been on TV now. And I remember meeting her there for the first time. I remember she was just like, yeah, we drove down from New York. We're just happy to get out of New York. And so it kind of became this, like, you're meeting comedians from other parts of the country. It kind of had that truck stop kind of vibe, if you will. Not scenically, it's not like a truck stop, but like it's that sort of like that hub for travelers, if you will. You got like different performers from like New York. You had a lot of DC comics came through. I got to meet this guy, Diego Atanasio, who's a Michigan comic, who he's like this nomad comic who I've only met him outside of Chicago. Like we've just run into each other in New York, and we've run into each other like just in different parts of the country. So it's just so funny how we've never met in the Midwest. But you meet people at these festivals that you never know when you're gonna run into later in life. Kind of to bring it back to wrestling, Surratt, like these wrestlers will be on the indie scene, and then they might run into each other, 10 years from now at like a WWE house show or something, and you pick up right where you left off. So it had that kind of like traveler vibe to it, this feeling of, okay, I'm meeting comics from other parts of the country, really feeling part of a community. And I have to say, those festival promoters for Laugh Your Asheville, they did a great job. They had multiple green rooms at the venues. We got to perform at a brewery. So it was literally they shut down a brewery and they set up like a back room right by like where the machines and all were. They set up a stage, they set up a curtain, they gave it elevation because elevation's important. And it was this very packed room. We're talking like 200 people in this brewery. It was a great time. I still have a bunch of pictures from that event, and I still have the clip from that event too. I got introduced by the host, and what they did was they had the headliners for the festival host the weekday shows. So my host was Carl LeBeau, who's a very legendary road performer. He's performed with pretty much everybody, Kinnison, Bill Hicks, all these guys. So Carl LeBeau's a legend. So to have Carl LeBeau, he actually, I gotta say, Carl LeBeau didn't pull a tone bell. He actually got my name correctly, but I remember giving him the piece of paper that had my phonetic name on it, and I think that's what started helping too. But yeah, that was just a really cool show because you had 200 people there. You had the festival promoters there. You had a green room with food that you could just, just gorge out on afterwards. So it made you feel like a real performer. And I think that's the thing that a lot of, my favorite festivals have had is they really make you feel like the star of the show. You have to drive down there and there's that like, I got to get there. And, we stayed at they had the hotel that had the festival discount, but it was still like kind of an expensive hotel. So I found a Days Inn that was only like, $40 a night, and it was a Days Inn, it was fine. It worked, but the travel driving down there was rough. Cause it is like from Chicago to Asheville. I think it was like 12 hours straight, and that's if you try not to take too many bathroom breaks or whatever. But yeah, travel down was rough. Another thing that we did that was smart was we got down there. I was performing on Wednesday. So we got down there Tuesday. I was like, let's not get there. Try to get down there a day before your sets. You're not just driving in and like, oh, I got to go straight to the show. Like, no, get in on the Tuesday so you have a day to decompress and kind of get ready for the show. So that show went great on Wednesday. Saturday was going to be the industry show. Then I find out, and I was going to actually stay for that. What was it? It was all this weird week of do Asheville, and then Sunday drive back to Chicago Saturday night. Sunday morning, fly out again because that's when I was going to the ZTV Desi Festival in San Francisco. So literally it was going to be drive to Asheville Tuesday, drive back Saturday, stay in Chicago, and then fly to SF, San Francisco. And then what happened is there's a comedian, actor, performer named Fawzia Mirza who she was directing and producing a movie called Signature Move that you can find. I think it's on Amazon Prime still. It's a movie about her falling in love with the luchador wrestler. It's literally it's a romantic story about falling in love with a luchador wrestler. And she had asked me, hey, and she's kind of the South Asian, Pakistani Indian background. And they wanted to film a scene in an Indian grocery store where they walk in wearing the luchador masks. And I play the shop clerk. I think they're robbing the place because of the luchador masks. So she's like, I would like you to be part of the scene. Can you come back? So I had to drive back to Asheville from Asheville to Chicago Friday. Originally it was like, oh, just come back by Saturday afternoon. I'm like, fuck. All right, we'll drive Saturday morning. Then literally Friday afternoon, she's like, hey, can you be there Saturday morning? So we're like, fuck. So we check out of the hotel. Luckily, we just make the time we can check out. Because I was supposed to do like this private birthday party event Friday morning. Didn't get a chance to do that. It's fine. We drive back. We haul some ass. We're talking like 80 miles an hour, and it's me and another brown person. So you got to be careful when you're driving through the southeast corner of the country. So we're driving back. We get back to Chicago at like 6:30 in the morning. I want to say 6:30 a.m. Saturday time. But we had rented the car from an enterprise in the suburbs. So we took the exit. We were in the city. So we literally had to take another exit, go back down, go to the suburbs to drop off the enterprise. And then my friend got in his car that he left at his parents' house because he didn't want to use his car to drive down to Asheville. That's a whole other, that's his, that's a whole other story, Surratt. But we take his car. So I don't get back to my actual place in the city till like 7:30 in the morning. I get into bed. I take a 30-minute power nap. But it's you're coming down from the high of performing in Asheville, North Carolina. I think I maybe slept for 10 minutes, maybe like of actual sleep. It was just like me with my eyes closed for 30 minutes. And I get up, brush my teeth, and then I just kind of get into changing the clothes. And then I get to Indian Market. And by the way, it's raining that day too. So rain is coming down, thunderstorms. Get there. There's like cameras all over the street because they taped this in Devon Avenue, which is like the big Little India section of Chicago. They've closed down the street. There's rain gutter. Everything is going on crazy. I get into the grocery store. Guess what? I thought, oh, they're going to close off the grocery store. No, the grocery store is still open. They're filming this movie while the grocery store is still open too. So that's insane, right? So we find an area as the people I'm siphoned off with the extras, and also the other thing was I hadn't been on set at any day this week or any time for the movie. So they're like, oh, you've never been on set before? You got to sign this form and this form. So I'm like literally trying to get into character while filling out 10,000 pieces of paperwork, filling out everything. Oh, hey, you didn't fill out your 1099 because we need that. We have to pay you somehow. Sign this, sign this, sign this. So literally I'm getting into character as a shop clerk. I'm being fitted for this like India. It's called a kurta, but it's like the Indian like traditional shirt or whatever. It looks like kind of like, if you've ever seen Disney's Aladdin on Ice, it's like the little like robe thing that he wears. That's all it looks like. So getting fitted for all this stuff, signing forms, Fozia's in character. There's luchador masks everywhere. It's insane. I do the scene and then she's like, okay, hey, can you do something for our Facebook page? So I'm like, all right, that's fine. Yeah. So I end up doing like this riff on Indian spices versus fruit. And it's like, I'm literally doing, again, to talk about doing stand-up in places that aren't stand-up. I'm now performing stand-up for the Facebook cameras in this Indian grocery store while it's raining outside on literally no sleep after driving back from Asheville, North Carolina. 2015 was an insane year, Surratt. So yeah, that was insane. Then I end up going back to my apartment, sleeping for like an hour. But again, you just filmed, like when you do something like that, it's very hard to just decompress and go back to sleep. You know what I mean? Like you're coming down. It's like a performance high. So I'm coming down from all that. And I think I maybe sleep for like half or 40 minutes. Then I find out, and this is again, I always recommend to comics, you have your Google Doc with your calendar, or you have a Google Calendar that has your performances. Keep a Google Doc as a backup too, because you never know when your Google Calendar is not going to sync up properly. Always keep a Google Doc with your shows on it, just in case. I forgot. I booked myself at this, it was like a sketch show / stand-up show at the Hideout Theater, which is like this very independent, it's a very cool music venue in Chicago, but it's like, it's kind of siphoned off from like the rest of the city. Like it's kind of near like a Home Depot outlet and like a factory. So it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. I forgot I booked that at 8 p.m. too. So, and my flight for San Francisco leaves. I thought it was a 10 a.m. flight. No, I got bumped down to a 6 a.m. Takeoff. So I got to be at the airport. I look like this. You think I'm getting to an airport 30 minutes before flight? No, I got to get there 2 hours early, Surratt. So I'm like, all right, I'll leave for the airport at 4 a.m. So I'm like, I'll still get some sleep after that. What's it called? That 8 p.m. show. I get no sleep after that show because after the 8 p.m. show, I found out a good comic friend of mine's birthday is that night and they're doing a house party for him. So I end up at that house party, literally staying there till like 3 a.m. I take an Uber back to my place, tell the Uber, like, we're doing 2 destinations on this thing. I run in and grab my suitcase. Luckily, I packed my suitcase before leaving for that show. Grab that suitcase, get into the Uber, drive to the airport, get on that plane. Then I finally get a few hours of sleep on that plane going to San Francisco for ZTV's Desi Comedy Festival, which I mean, that's a whole. I feel like that's like we need like an intermission, I think, for this story. But the ZTV Festival, I'll talk about the ZTV Festival a little bit too, because that again is a good festival because there are people I met at that festival that I'm lifelong friends with now. So ZTV is a South Asian Indian network. That's like we all have like parents who watch like the international channels or whatever. So ZTV is like available on like Dish Network or whatever. You know what I mean? So like it's a network out there, but it's sort of like well known overseas. It doesn't get a lot of traction in America, but they want to sponsor a comedy festival. So they worked with these two comics that are based in San Francisco. It's Samson Kaletkar and Abhay Nadkarni. Both are fantastic Desi comedians, Indian comedians, if you will. And they also were working with the producer named Richard Savarte, who he runs one of the best shows in San Francisco. It's called The Setup. It's kind of like sort of a independent room, but again, low ceiling, super intimate. It's in the basement of a brewery. So again, using that kind of, that built-in audience of a brewery, people like to drink, Seth, that, like, people that it's that perfect marriage of alcohol lovers, alcoholics, and comedy fans coming together. So there's a great audience turnout at The Setup. I definitely recommend comics check out The Setup. So they were like, okay, we want to do a South Asian festival. How do we do it? So what the Desi Festival is it's spread out over 2 weeks, but they do one show a night. They don't do multiple shows in a night, which that's a whole other. I feel like we could go off on a tangent about that, how comedy festivals have like multiple shows in a night. And I feel like that sometimes cannibalizes your audience because, if you do one show a night, you can get audiences from each night coming out. They don't have to pick and choose. They can find the festival shows that are good for them. So it was a festival. I thought that festival just took place, just in San Francisco. It actually takes place all over California. They would be like, one night would be in Santa Clara, one night would be in San Diego, one night would be in Sacramento. So it wasn't just San Francisco. It's actually a full-on California-based festival. And each night would be different South Asian comics, but they would also bring in, some really talented people who've been on like Comedy Central. There was a guy, Paul Varghese, who got to be on the show. He's been on Last Comic Standing. He's been on Comedy Central. Rajiv Satyal was on the festival too. He's nationally touring headliner. He's worked with like Russell Peters and all those people. I think he's done some stuff for HBO as well. He's a fantastic performer. So again, getting to perform with all those people and getting to perform, in venues like the Throckmorton, which is a venue that Robin Williams, that's like Robin Williams, like home theater that he started when he was a young stand-up. It's like, again, these are improv rooms and acting rooms that have become stand-up rooms, kind of what I talked about earlier. You got to perform at the Annoyance Theater. You know what I'm talking about. So it's, again, that perfect mix of performing in a different part of California every night for a different type of audience, not just South Asians, mind you. When I did the show in Sacramento, and I believe the Sacramento venue was like a assembly hall. So it was like, it's a venue that was used for like diplomats and political leaders to come in too. It was just a cool venue. But I remember I had some friends come through who weren't South Asian. They just happened to live in Sacramento, and I hadn't seen them in 2 years. I'm like, yeah, if you want to come to the show. But I was thinking in my head, are they going to enjoy, it's going to be obviously South Asian skewed material, right? Not at all. They enjoyed everybody. And to me, that spoke to the beauty. We talked earlier about Asian themed festivals and, wanting to provide this space for the Asian audiences that, hey, we can see someone that looks like me on stage. Great. But it's also great when you have non-Asians show up. You have white people show up. You have Latinos show up, especially in a place like California. So many, Latinos were showing up to the show and seeing that these experiences as South Asians and Asians, because there were also East Asians on the show as well, seeing that their experiences matched up with other immigrant experiences as well, and truly feeling like, okay, this experience about my Indian parents will also translate to someone who happens to be Latinx and has Latinx parents as well. And to me, that's, again, we talk about, sort of the humanism of comedy in that, okay, my experiences translate to people who aren't even on my background as well. So to me, that was one of the other great learning experiences about, performing for the ZTV Festival, performing in San Francisco. Another thing I learned about San Francisco is, and I feel like I'm just going off on TED Talk, but I'll keep this fun, Sarath. But San Francisco, I think, gets a rap for a lot of comedians. Like a lot of comedians think, oh, San Francisco's super liberal, super progressive. They're going to be tight on material, and the audiences won't be super open-minded to material. I would say it's the exact opposite. They are very open-minded material. Some of the best audiences and best shows I've had outside of Chicago, I have to give it up to San Francisco. Between the San Francisco Sketch Fest, between Desi Festival, San Francisco is a lovely place to perform. Beautiful city. If it wasn't insanely expensive to live in, I probably would have moved to San Francisco at some point. It's a beautiful city. You have so many cities nearby. You want to do acting and TV stuff, LA is right there. And that's kind of where you have to be if you want to write or do anything sort of acting related. Obviously, New York has its place too. There are some great TV shows that we all know and love, new movies that are from New York too. But, the other major hub for performing is LA. And, if you can't necessarily live in LA, I think having San Francisco right there is great because you have this vibrant stand-up scene in LA, in San Francisco that you have access to. And it's really, every time I've gone to LA, I've always gone through San Francisco to try to do some shows in San Francisco. It's only a 4-hour, we did because I didn't want to rent a car, so I just did the megabus. It's only a 4-hour megabus ride. That's megabus making the stops that megabus makes. If you were to drive, you could probably clear that ride in 2 hours if you were driving. So it's not that far. And then you have San Diego. That's a wonderful city as well. That's actually, to go back to Stand Up NBC, that is the one city, because so Stand Up NBC, I forgot to mention, they do a talent search in every major. They try to pick different cities. They rotate every year. So Chicago was one of the few cities they picked every year, but there was one year they didn't pick Chicago. And the year I auditioned outside Chicago, guess what city I picked? San Diego at the American Comedy Factory. No, American Comedy Company, excuse me. The American Comedy Company, which is a great club. It's actually featured in I Am Road Comic. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's a great movie. You should check it out, everybody. And sorry if you check it out. But American Comedy Club Company is featured in that movie. It's a great club. So to be able to do Stand Up NBC in a club that I had they were very welcoming at that club. And, the Stand Up NBC people had remembered me from the year before. And I needed that because I had literally come into San Diego I think I came in the night before. And I remember I found like some local show at a sports bar to do just as like a warm up. I'm like, I should do a show in San Diego once to kind of get a lay of the land. So yeah, again, San Diego, super supportive. And to have that background of being San Francisco's right there, LA is right there, it made those festivals wonderful. So yeah, I look back on it. I look back on fondly 2015, 2016 performing on all those shows. It's great. San Francisco Sketch Fest. I did San Francisco Sketch Fest 2016. I did that in 2017 as well. San Francisco Sketch Fest is a great festival because their after parties are done at night. That's a festival where that goes on for like 2 weeks. You have kids in the hall doing like a panel. You have what's his name? John Hamm is doing like a Bob's Burger table read in front of an audience. These are all just other shows on the festival. So to be able to do just any sort of comedy on a festival of that magnitude is wonderful. And it's sponsored by Audible. So audible.com would set up like a hospitality tent at this like really fancy Japanese hotel. And so, I remember just not staying at that hotel because it was way too expensive. But again, going to that hotel every day and being at their hospitality tent, like again, bag of swag, you get there, the food is there. It's super supportive. And so to do those type of high scale festivals, be at an after party and then you see, oh, John Hamm is like talking to somebody 20 feet away from me. That's really cool. Again, kind of, you need those when you're coming up and, you're going to have to perform at some bar show 10 days later for a pounds check. You need to be able to look fondly back on those fun days when you're performing, at this high stakes festival, and what was beautiful about the San Francisco Sketch Fest, and something I'm really grateful about that sketch festival, is doing that festival opened the doors to me doing the setup and doing some of the higher level shows in San Francisco, because I had that credit that, I didn't need to kind of work my way up in San Francisco. I got to meet some of the best comedians, in San Francisco through doing that festival. Comedians like Andrew Arolfo, who he did Joe Coy's Netflix show. I don't know if you got to see that, where he went to, I believe he went to Philippines to do like a stand-up special out there. So Andrew Arolfo, shout out to him. He's a great performer. I got to meet him at the San Francisco Sketch Fest. Nicole Kalasich, she doesn't really do a lot of stand-up anymore, but she's a talented writer performer. I got to become good friends with her. She took me to get authentic Mexican food in San Francisco because of hanging out with her at that festival. Richard Zavarte, who I mentioned earlier, he's a good friend of mine. I hang out with him every time I'm in LA. I think I just texted him today, actually. I met him through San Francisco Sketch Fest. Sonia Vai is a fantastic friend of mine who now lives in New York. I stay on her couch whenever I'm in New York. She's a good friend of mine. So again, to kind of bring it all home, what I'm saying is you do these festivals, and yeah, the credit is great, and yeah, the show is great. But to me, it's the friendships that you make from that really matter. And being able to perform outside of your home city and really feel like, hey, this material I'm doing isn't just Chicago centric, because that's something I think we've all felt too is my material just specific, or is it going to work for everybody? And to be able to do these festivals, getting out of your comfort zone, getting out of your bubble, if you will, you need that as a performer. And I think that's I feel for comics right now who are, 1, 2, 3 years in, who this is the time when you're 1 to 2, 3 years when you want to kind of go outside and perform outside of your city. And right now it's a little difficult to do that. So, to me, I hope we can get back to a point where we can regularly check out, things out of our own comfort zones and out of our own home states, because we need that as performers. We need that kind of diversity, in audiences too, because to me, if I'm just doing my sets for the same type of audiences, I will naturally go on to autopilot. I'm naturally going to get bored with my material. To me, it's when you're doing a show that's outside of my comfort zone, even if it's similar jokes, at least I can tailor the material to that different audience. And to me, that's the excitement. And you might even get, an extra punchline out of it, an extra tag out of it. So to me, that's the beauty of these festivals. And that's what I look fondly back on all of them. And that's what I love about festivals. And I think that's the one thing I think people don't really talk about. I think a lot of people, when they think about festivals, they think about like, oh, there's a entrance fee, and oh, is there industry there? And, I want to get seen by the Letterman bookers or the Stephen Colbert bookers or the Conan bookers. And that's all well and dandy. You need that. You should have some sort of industry opportunities at the festival, but it really should be about the lifelong friendships that you make. And it really should be about getting the chance to perform outside of your comfort zone. So to me, that's what I hold on to from those festivals. You mentioned Milwaukee Festival. I'll touch on that real quick because I really want to touch on the people that run the Milwaukee comedy scene. It's Greg Bach, it's Matt Kemple, and it's Caitlin McCarthy, and they run a comedy club out of Milwaukee now called Laughing Tap. And I definitely encourage, comics, if you're looking for a club to check out, they are doing it right now. Like I can't think of a club that is taking COVID precautions more seriously than the Laughing Tap. So shout out to the Laughing Tap. Shout out to Milwaukee comedy. Greg Bach in particular, he's a good friend of mine. That man just couldn't be one of them. He is probably the nicest person in comedy. I love Greg Bach. He's a good dude. So whenever I do the Milwaukee Comedy Festival, it truly feels like a vacation. It's a vacation where I get to go and yell my jokes into a microphone. So I love all those festivals. It's all everybody. My hat's off to anybody trying to put on a comedy festival. That is not the easiest thing to do, Sarath. I don't know about you. It's an uphill battle running a festival.
Indeed. With festivals, I have one in Colorado, and I'm starting another one in Daytona Beach. So I have spreadsheets and designing the merch, and I have no team, so I do this all by myself. I schedule everyone, and like you said, it's like making lifelong friends at those festivals. And I'm introducing the bands and the comics to the venue owners, so that way they can set up their own shows and bring their people together, and that's what it's all about.
Exactly. Yeah, like when I did the Milwaukee Comedy Festival, the music hall that I performed at is called Shank Hall. I remember I got to open for Beth Stelling, who's a fantastic performer, but the venue owner came up to us, both of us, afterwards, and was just like, "Hey, we'd love to have you both back individually to perform." And that's the beauty of it, is you're getting to perform through this festival, but then you're getting the contact of the venue to come back and set up your own shows later. It's about that post-show booking afterwards too, that people don't always think about. Make friends with the venue owners. And I remember music hall, you talk about musicians and comedy, music halls are a great place to perform at too for stand-up comedians, because they are designed for performances. And the stories you hear, I remember being at that music hall at the Milwaukee Comedy Festival, and the owner was just like telling me about how Prince got to perform there back in the day. He got to see like John Belushi do blues, because obviously Milwaukee and Chicago is like 90 minutes with bad traffic. They're very close to each other. So yeah, it's so cool to perform at music halls. I don't think enough. I think I encourage comedy fans, and I encourage people like you, and I encourage everybody, like, check out a music hall, check out different types of performances too. Like, I don't know about you, but there was a period like in 2016, 2017, like when I was doing all those festivals, where I started going to just concerts again, like non-stand-up things, just music, and not even music comedy, just musical performances. And I just kind of fell in love with watching other types of performances, because you never know, there might be some little thing you can take from a rock band's performance that you can incorporate into a stand-up show. So to me, that's what's exciting about festivals, and performing at like a what is it, like Bumbershoot or South by Southwest. You have these different, maybe not this year, I know South by Southwest is virtual this year, but that would be the beauty of, like, a real in-person festival, having that comedy tent where, okay, I can do my comedy here, but I can go and watch bands or whatever afterwards. And I'm always hopeful that when things get back to some sense of normalcy, that the comedy tent at the music festival remains. I think that marriage of musicians and comedians that you were talking about, I hope that continues even after, we get out of this pandemic world we're in.
Absolutely. That's what you're partaking in. It's like you said, it's like seeing concerts and seeing how musicians perform. And I was fortunate, like, I was a concert journalist in LA, and when I lived out there for like 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I got paid to go to concerts. And going back to the pro wrestling thing, my very first professional interview, was with Be Real from Cypress Hill. And one of my
Nice.
one of my questions was like, hey, I know your music was on their soundtracks, and who are your favorite wrestlers? And it made him laugh, because it was like, he didn't know that I had hit him with that question.
Yeah.
It's like Rob Van Dam and like
There you go.
Snuka, and he was just like going off, and it was like, man, it's so cool to see you be like that, and this is just awesome.
And for him, he must have loved it, because he's probably used to getting a certain type of question, but not a wrestling question. So it was probably exciting as an interview for him.
Absolutely. And DJ Muggs from Soul Assassin and Cypress Hill was the same way, but I got to interview him in Denver, and so it was just super.
Did you ask him about DJ Muggs? Because I know and I don't know if this is like the rumor or the lore, but weren't they banned from SNL because DJ Muggs lit a joint on the SNL stage? I don't know if you asked him about that.
I didn't, because I only had like 3 or 4 minutes with him, so I just asked him what was on his EPK, and I'm like, all right, cool.
Well, that's for next time you interview.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Cypress Hill is so great. I don't know if you remember when like hip hop albums and rap albums would have like comedy sketches in the album, like between it's so funny how musicians are the biggest comedy fans and the biggest wrestling fans. You think that people are just a fan of one genre, the genre they perform, but not at all. Comedy fans are big music fans. It's like comedians want to be musicians and musicians want to be comedians, and that kind of, crop back and forth between that is insane. Kanye West, this is people aren't going to believe me, but I have a good friend in the music business. He goes by Keynote. He was like a manager, producer, kind of beat maker. He's uncredited on Kanye West 808s and Heartbreaks album. But, in 2005, he was working with Kanye in Chicago, and I got to come to the event with him. And so I got to talk with Kanye for 30 minutes. I don't think, by the way, if anyone is watching this, I have never told this story before. I'm just telling, you're getting an exclusive threat, because, I've told a few people, but no one really believes me. I have no video proof or evidence. I didn't want to be a fanboy with Kanye and take a picture with him. But I remember talking to Kanye, and this is 2005, when I was going to Lakeshore Theater, and I hadn't really started my comedy journey yet, but I was a comedy fan. I remember I told him, like, hey, Kanye, I heard you're a big comedy fan. He was like, yeah, I'm a big Kinston Hall fan. So literally in 2005, I talked to Kanye West for 25 minutes about Kids in the Hall. And like he was also a big Zach Galifianakis fan. He was a big fan of Patton Oswalt when they had done that tour, the Comedians of Comedy tour. And you might recall Kanye West commissioned Zach Galifianakis to do, I believe it was Can't Tell Me Nothing. Like he did like an alternative version of his video, because he loves Zach Galifianakis' alternative comedy so much. He's like, no, I want you to film lip syncing my video, because he was just a huge, he knew about like Larry David and Zach Galifianakis, like before those guys had really Larry David had taken off, obviously, but he knew about Zach before The Hangover. And to me, that I love hearing stories like that Cypress Hill is a wrestling fan, or, Insane Clown Posse is a wrestling fan, a big comedy fan. Insane Clown Posse, they had comedians at their big, what's that called? Gathering of the Juggalos. They're huge comedy fans. They've had like Pauly Shore and Gilbert Gottfried come to their festivals. And to me, I love hearing like when genres cross pollinate. I love that. like when Eminem did that SNL sketch recently. Like Eminem's a big comedy fan. I love hearing stories like that. To me, it shows that these art forms, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do as a comedian or a musician is we're trying to make people feel good, especially right now when things aren't, the happiest outside. We need content out there to make people feel good. And to hear that musicians and comedians can come together and we can do that same thing of what is our end goal, making people feel good. Oh, we can come together and make people feel good for that hour. And we happen to be fans of one another, even though we're not in the same genre. To me, I love that. That's what keeps me going. That's the stuff that's more exciting than, a paycheck or something else. It's hearing that who's a fan of me or whatever, or who's a fan of comedy in general. And that's the stuff I remember.
Absolutely. And it's so true what you said too. It's like hearing comedians on rap albums, because I love when I heard Chris Rock's album on Kanye's album, it was awesome. When I heard Tracy Morgan on the Wu Massacre album, that was awesome, and the whole landlord skit. And it's just like, man, this is so awesome. And it's true about the musicians and the comics, because like I have to update my lineup for this year's fest in Colorado, and it's like it starts off nice and easy with like singer-songwriters, and then towards the end of the night it's going to be like EDM and trance DJs.
There you go. Hell yeah.
Flow stick with the next, like it's just like a sandwich between like comedians on the Friday and then the Monday, but then between the Saturday and Sunday is the music. And there's like metal, punk, ska, like jazz, funk, everything, and it's just so neat to see them all like just perform together. And I broke it down to like the setup and then the breakdowns, where if they're multiple bands or share instruments, they play back to back, and it's gonna make it so much easier on me. And then it's gonna be beautiful.
Oh my god, yeah, the setup and breakdown for these different bands. Yeah, I can't imagine it's smart of you, and that's good foresight to like kind of plan it out. Like, yeah, why go from like an EDM band to like a metal band? Like, try to group the genres together. I think that's, but good on you for being eclectic in your musical taste too, because that's another thing too. I don't know about you, but like when I was like in high school, I felt like everybody only liked one genre of music, and I feel like that's just changed now. And I feel like I'm not talking to many high schoolers these days, but I would hope that a high schooler today is more, and maybe it's because of the internet, maybe it's because of the exposure to different genres. I would hope a high schooler today is able to like ska and metal and hip hop and kind of these cross pollination, genres that are forming, because like back in my day when I was in high school, it was like, yeah, Limp Bizkit had like a DJ, so they were kind of hip hoppy, but they were still like, they were new metal-y. It was mostly rock, but they'd have a DJ, and Kid Rock would beatbox, or Kid Rock would do a song with, Run DMC or whatever. So like you had like these minor cross pollinations of genres, but now you have everybody doing everything. You have Lil Wayne playing guitar. You have Beastie Boys playing guitar. I mean, obviously, R.I.P. Adam Yauch is MCA, but like, I like that now, especially with the internet, because of, different, trap genres and different types of musicians now. I like that people are exposing themselves as performers to different genres. And I think it's great for the fans too. And maybe that is really the benefit of the internet, benefit of, these streaming sites where, yeah, maybe the artist necessarily isn't getting paid as much through online streaming. That's why it's good to have things like Bandcamp, because the Spotify artist money isn't, I'm on Spotify, so I can say it's not shitting on Spotify, right? My album's on Spotify, but you tend not to make as much money streaming to Spotify. I don't think that's, groundbreaking news, but the fact that you can have different artists being exposed to different platforms, I think that's great too. It's funny I brought up Spotify. Bad Bunny, he's #1 album on Spotify, and then he's a big wrestling fan too. He's got the song about Booker T, which is great too. And now he's doing stuff on WWE right now. So it's this, it's that thing of using the Spotify platform to then, accelerate yourself and then being exposed then to things like pro wrestling. So it's fucking wonderful. I love it. And also wrestling themes. That's the other thing too. Spotify has the whole playlist of like Rob Van Dam's theme or like the ECW theme. I've been able to kind of reconnect with like all the old wrestling themes that I used to like, so it's great for having these online platforms. It's great for a myriad of reasons. And I love it.
Indeed. And circling back to like ICP, like they have JCW and when in Daytona Beach, they walk up to DX, the intro, and they walk up to Randy Orton's,
Yes.
voices, and it's such a cool, like, you'll love Daytona Beach's stand-up comedy scene. They just like walk up to these pro wrestling themes. It's just so awesome.
I'll have to
And
check it out. Yeah, when I can travel, I'll have to check that out. That sounds so cool. Yeah. Oh yeah, ICP is like they're huge wrestling. Like they would, if I'm not mistaken, they would do like a wrestling federation at the festival. They would bring out like Junkyard Dog and I think Jake the Snake and I think Roddy Piper might have done some stuff for them too. And they were like, it's funny how a lot of these musicians and all they're fan of like the old school. So they'll be like, yeah, where's Yokozuna? And you got to be like, oh, he's unfortunately passed away. Sorry guys, but yeah, like. It's so great to see these cross pollinations of wrestlers, musicians. Chris Jericho has a band now too. Like it's insane. And but you also like I don't know about you, but like we talked about watching musicians to kind of what other performance techniques maybe you might pick up something. I have to admit I think I've learned more from wrestling promos if anything too, like kind of ring mic work and all. There's a lot to be said. I think performers, not just actors, comedians. There's something to be said for watching those promo segments and the trash talking segments. There's something that like it's no one should be shocked that The Rock is such a popular movie star. I mean, he's been acting and being charismatic for decades. So it's I think people sleep on the performance side of pro wrestling.
most definitely. In ICP, they crashed my interview when I was interviewing Dope DOD in Jacksonville,
Oh,
and like
cool.
DJ Paul from 36 Mafia crashed it too because he was part of the tour. And I'm like, I can't wait to share these like Be Real, DJ mugs in the ICP crash my interview with you, because you're gonna be like, this is insane. Like, I don't know how I pulled it off, but they just showed up, and I'm like, all right, this is neat. So,
So
and 18. And so I love your work ethic and your observational humor, because that's like my style of comedy. Like, you got to have that observational humor along with your work ethic, and then it just shows. And you've landed on prestigious stages from Zany's Comedy Club, The Laugh Factory, Caroline's in New York, and you've also performed at universities from Northwestern University, the University of Chicago, Marquette University, and DePaul University. And what was it like performing in, we talked about Zany's and The Laugh Factory and Caroline's, but what was it like performing at all those universities?
that's college. Performing in colleges is something that people, I think a lot of comics, I think more comics should be more open to it. I know, there's this mindset with certain kind of comics coming up in the community where they're like, oh, you're selling out if you do a cruise, or you're selling out if you do a college, blah, blah, blah. And then obviously I know Jerry Seinfeld had famously said in an interview about like, oh, college crowds are too PC or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But every college show I've done, I've learned something from them. There really is, again, to talk about how Stand Up NBC and those showcase sets perfected that tight five. You learn from the college performance crowds too. You learn, okay, I got to learn how to read the room. I have two albums out. My first EP is called Read the Room for a very specific reason, because I truly believe that, yes, your jokes, you might have a set that you do, but you tailor that set. And we've talked about this a little bit already, Surratt, you tailor each set to every audience. You might tag it up a certain way. So to me, when I'm doing these college shows, you do have to tailor things a little bit differently, but I would do that for any room. If I'm performing at a club versus a comic book store at 10 p.m., or if I'm going to perform at the House of Blues and then go to Annoyance Theater, for example, you did Annoyance Theater, my set at Annoyance Theater is going to be different than my set at the Laugh Factory. and both these venues are very close. So to me, colleges are just that it's right up there as well. It's a different type of audience, but to me, I enjoy that type of audience. I will say this. So I started my kind of opening for comedians performances at colleges. It came partly because I started off opening up for comedians who were doing the big headlining set. I have to give credit to, he's a San Francisco comic. And I hope you get to talk to him eventually, Sammy Obeid, but he's a fantastic performer. This is a guy who did 1,000 days of comedy in a row. And he had come to Chicago. He was just doing some sets at the Laugh Factory or whatever. And I saw him at the Laugh Factory. We started talking a little bit. We built a friendship I have with him to this day. And he had seen me perform a little bit. He's like, hey, man, I got to do this show in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Again, where the fuck is Sheboygan, Wisconsin? I have no idea. But I was like, okay, sure. Let's go to Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Now he gets the benefit of, he's going up at the show. He's doing an hour. He would be going up cold without anybody to kind of warm him up. Because at these college shows, you go up there, if you're just the headliner and they haven't, some colleges will book a local student to do 5 minutes, but most of the time it's just the, student activities organizer going up and be like, hey, everybody, are you ready for comedy? Give it up for your headliner. And they have to kind of go up cold, the performer. So Samuel Bade is getting the benefit of having somebody like me. I'm quote unquote the opener. I'm taking the bullet. But for me, I'm getting the experience of performing at this college. And then, we talked about earlier with the music venue, the festival and the comedy person, the comedian, they get to connect and they come back later. I would then connect with the student activities organizer, and then I would come back and headline myself, which I did. First college I did was Lakeland College in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, opening for Sammy Bade. Then I came back there a year later and did my own headlining set. And then I brought another comic with me to do the opening set. So it became the cycle of I would perform at a university with Samuel Bade, and then I would come back later and headline it myself. Now, there were steps that went into that process. Obviously, I had to do well. I couldn't just go up there and be like, fuck this school, fuck religion, blah, 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 and then, and then just leave. You have to accommodate yourself to the venue. So, okay, what can you do so that you're not pissing off people at the university? Well, one thing you can do is you can go up to the student activities organizer and say, okay, hey, do you guys have any content restrictions? And obviously on a show like that, Samuel Bade is the headliner. So he's probably already communicated those things with the student activities organizer. But in one of those cases, I was like, you know what? I will still build my own relationship with them. I'll talk to them. So I asked Samuel Bade, hey, is it cool if I talk to the student activities organizer? He's like, yeah, go for it. He was like, yeah. And it was funny. One of those times he was like, actually, yeah, can you talk to him and figure out what content restrictions are? Because he'd forgotten he was just busy with other things or whatever. So it was helpful to him also that I'm taking the initiative to go and ask the student activity organizer content restrictions. So I went and I asked, I said, are there certain restrictions? Now there's a way to ask that question too. I think a lot of comics just like, so can I just go up there and say fuck or what? Like you can't come out like an asshole. You have to be somewhat respectful in how you ask that question. So for me, I like to use the words content restrictions, and I like to say, are there any topics you're uncomfortable with me mentioning? I think that's a better way to kind of approach how you ask that question. I don't like to, I know some people will go, oh, can I talk about religion? They will openly ask that question directly. I think it's better that you let them tell you what the restrictions are. If you openly ask, then you're kind of inviting the restrictions on yourself. But if you ask them, then you hear it from them. And to me, yeah, it can be an easy assumption to assume that a school, especially, if it's a college, I mean, Lakeland wasn't a religious school. That was just your standard state school or whatever for Sheboygan or whatever. But if it's like a religious school in name, like if it's a school called Saint Xavier or something or whatever, maybe you could ask them directly. But what I found is most of those schools, religious stuff really isn't the problem. They tend to have more of a problem, I've noticed, with sexual content, but it's more like directly sexual content, like being like, yeah, I was nailing this girl after school, like something like in your face like that. What I found with those schools is they love innuendo. Like you can still kind of curse, but if you kind of dance the line behind it, they love that. Like I have a joke I do about mistaking hand sanitizer for Astroglide lube. So I'm really just I'm not talking about the details of the lube. I'm just mentioning the topic of lube. So it's not graphic in nature, but it's still adult enough that college kids will be like, hey, they're speaking to me, adult themes, but not graphic in nature. So I found that a lot of schools, I don't want to generalize and say all schools are like that, because I really don't want to generalize. I think anybody who's doing a college show should always double check with their student activity coordinator beforehand. But generally speaking, what I've found works is, or what doesn't work is graphic sexual content. And that's kind of a way to kind of circumvent the system a little bit. But yeah, Lakeland was really cool. I did a lot of Wisconsin colleges with Samuel Bade. We did like the Sheboygan circuit, if you will. We did University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Again, I've been to Milwaukee. I remember like in 2017, I went to Milwaukee every weekend in August of 2017. First it was the colleges, then it was Marquette University, then it was Milwaukee Comedy Festival. Then I came back the following weekend to perform in an art gallery. So yeah, Milwaukee, great colleges. The Wisconsin college town was great. One of the Milwaukee schools, I think it was University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, they had an auditorium, and they had said that, yeah, Pete Davidson was here the week before, and his opener sucked. So you were a really good opener. So I got to learn that I was better than Pete Davidson's opener. I got to sign the wall that they have there. So, like, the wall had like D.L. Hughley, Pete Davidson, John Mulaney. So to be able to sign your name on a wall that, John Mulaney's been a signature on, that was that was really cool to me. So I definitely love that. Again, feeling like you're a real comedian in those moments. You need those moments, because comedy, and you know this, threat, comedy will be humbling to you in more ways than one, time and time again. You're all going to do those hell gigs. You're going to do those terrible gigs. So you got to appreciate the good gigs that you get. You got to appreciate those college gigs. You got to appreciate the opportunities to perform, and it was great. But yeah, the Stevens Point show was interesting because we had a rapper there to bring it back to hip hop. They had a rapper open for us. The rapper was the MC of the day, and the rapper is the one who introduced me. And then Sammy Obeid loved my energy so much. That was the other thing. I became a really good opener for a while because I had such high energy. And I feel like a lot of headliners, I've gotten to work with like Maz Jobrani and all those guys. Like, they love high energy. And I think that's what kind of lent my act to a lot of opening acts when I was starting out. So Sammy Obeid was like, no, you're high energy. I want you to open, and then I want you to bring me up, because I knew his credits. I knew exactly what he wanted me to say. So again, building that relationship with him was great. So he was like, no, I remember he was like, no, tell Scumbag Kia, I want you to open for me. So, or I want you to intro me. So it was just a fun experience to talk with these hip hop artists, and work with the kids as well. That was the other thing too with that Stevens Point show is, the students after the show, they'll do like a meet and greet, and Sammy Obeid, he does a lot of math jokes. So the Stevens Point math team was there specifically. Like, they were cheering him on. They were like Def Jam audience members. They were like going nuts for his math puns. So it was great to meet them. Not to, talk big about myself, but it was cool to take pictures with people too after the show, again, building that relationship with the fans of Lakeland, with the fans of Stevens Point, even if it's just an audience member. Oh, hey, you're cool. Are you on Facebook? Are you on Instagram? Building that social media following organically. And then I've had fans from that show come to see me then, like when I'm at Chicago or whatever. So, you never know who you might meet at those shows that might come back and see you later, and they'll remember that, hey, I saw Prateek Srivastava when he was opening up for this dude in college, and I'll remember him and I'll go see him again. And, like you talked about with like ICP, building that relationship with the fans. Look at ICP. They put out so much content and records and merchandise that's geared towards building that relationship with the juggalos and the family, but the same thing comedians do as well. And if you're a college comedian, that's the perfect opportunity to build like a in-your-face relationship with those fans, because you will meet them after the show. I was against selling merch for a long time until I saw how Sammy Obeid sold his merch. He would have stickers, he would have his album, he would say, if you follow me, the first 10 people to newly follow me on Instagram, I will give you my album for free. Taking these kind of strategies, giving away things, So now, when I was doing colleges up until quarantine, I would give out, artwork from my album recording. I would give out the physical copies of the album. I would give out, these stickers that I made or whatever, again, building that relationship with the fans, because fans will remember, oh, I bought that thing from Prateek's show or Suret's show. I bought that cool hat or that cool shirt. And then they might remember you when you're on TV, or if they see you coming to the Improv nearest them, they're like, oh, Improv. I remember I saw Suret at that show with the band, and he was interviewing DJ Muggs. So yeah, I want to check him out. It creates a reminder in their mind. And I think that's, I talked earlier about standing out. You have to stand out when you're auditioning for stand-up MC, but you have to stand out in life. You have to stand out in your career. Being from Chicago, you got to learn how to compete with different entertaining forms. We're competing with musicians. We're competing with bar trivia. We're competing with sports. We're competing with blah, blah, blah. Even at that college show, we did Marquette University. We performed on their gym floor. Literally, the basketball hoop was right above me, and they set up a little stage underneath the basketball hoop. And yeah, there was I would say, yeah, there was 105 people there. But it was Marquette University. They're a school strength of 10,000 people. So you definitely had to be grateful for the audience that did show up that day, because they could have done office trivia that night or whatever. So you have to be grateful for the people that decided to come out to that stand-up show, even at that college, because they could have done anything else with their time. So, I learned a lot from those performances with Sammy. And then as I got to start headlining colleges on my own, going back to Lakeland, going back to Stevens Point, it's to be able to come back, feels good as well, because I was like, okay, I kind of know the layout of the school because I got to come here as an opener. So you kind of got like to do it with the training wheels, but now the training wheels are off and you're coming back on your own. But to have that experience beforehand, that made the show even better. You mentioned I performed at Northwestern. That was a cool show because I was working with a comedian who he's also been, kind of a mentor to me, was Azhar Usman. He's a great Midwest. I mean, he's not just performing in the Midwest. This man, I've literally been on the phone with him while he's flying to Malaysia. He'll be performing at Laugh Factory one day and then doing what I did, staying up late till 4 a.m. to take the plane to Malaysia to go perform at like a Muslim conference in Malaysia. That's a dude who he is a world comedian. I mean, there's a reason that Dave Chappelle calls him one of his favorite, comedians ever. I've gotten to see Azhar perform with Chappelle. I've gotten to see Azhar perform with Mo Amer, who's now on Rami Youssef's show on Hulu. I've gotten to meet Rami Youssef through Azhar Usman, he's doing great as well. So Azhar is great. So Azhar was doing a show for the Muslim Student Association, the MSA, at Northwestern University. So to me, it was, you're getting a chance to perform for young Muslim students at this school. There was a lot of freshman Muslim students, and this was also kind of after some of sort of the terrorist attacks that had been going on in the news at that time. I think this was like 2012. Yeah, it was 2012 because this was they had been like some of the Paris bombings, and then there had been some other bombings going on. So it was this time where like, how much can you talk about political content right now? Because there was also this thing about like, we don't want to get too political. When I did that show for Maz Jobrani, and I'm going off on a few different tangents here, but Azhar Usman was on both of those shows. But the Maz Jobrani show was interesting because, he's a Persian comedian, but he's kind of like the Seinfeld of the Middle East, where, he's gotten such a universal appeal overseas. So there were families in the crowd for that show. That wasn't just, college kids. That was families. So you had kids of all ages. So Maz Jobrani wanted no political material on the show. And because he was the headliner, you kind of had to follow his lead. He was like, you know what? We're here to have a good time. We want the audience to have a good time. This, tragic event had happened just 24 hours before. So today, no political material. So that one was different, where you had to kind of gear your mind, because I like to talk about what's going on in the news just in general. You know what I mean? So it was definitely a little bit of a pivot I had to do, but I appreciated it. And it definitely opened my eyes to, hey, I don't want to just perform for one age group. I'm not just here to perform for 20 somethings and 30 somethings. I want to be able to perform for a family. I would love to be able to do a show where somebody can bring their kids to. I'm not saying all my material should be kid oriented, but to have a night where families can come out and enjoy me, I would love that. And so it was great to see that kind of stuff from someone like Maz Jobrani. And then the pivot of that was doing the Northwestern show, I think like 2 days later. And that was the opposite, where Azhar was like, no, I want to talk about this. This is for the Muslim Student Association. I want to be able to talk about these things in an entertaining light. These are young students. These are young scholars. We had like, with Samuel Bade, we had the math team there, but for Azhar Usman's show, we had a lot of political science majors. I think like the freshman class of political science majors, they all came out. So that was the cool thing about that show, was while it was geared towards the MSA and Muslim Students Association, we had a good mix of everybody. And I love that. It was great to be able to do this show. And here's the other thing, I'm not even Muslim. My family's originally Hindu. So, there is this sort of religious clash between the two. But what I've loved is I've been able to perform my jokes about my Hindu family for Muslim students and see that, no, there are some things, there might be political disagreements overseas, but while we're in this country, it's good to know that we can come together. And there are things that I'm talking about with my Hindu family that can be related to a Muslim family. So that was such an eye-opening college experience as well, because that one was, it was going to be political. It was going to be predominantly Muslim, and it turned out to be political, but not just predominantly Muslim. So it was incredibly eye-opening. Then I got to do a few shows with Jenny Yang. That was the few shows that were at DePaul. Oh, no, I did DePaul's. So DePaul University is it's one of the largest Catholic schools in the country. That's also my alma mater. That's where I went to college. So to be able to do a show at a school that I used to go to was mind blowing. Like the first time I got a little emotional, first time I got to perform there because it was like, hey, I'm getting a chance to perform at my school. And what was funny is a show I used to produce at that time called Snack Attack. And I got to shout out my Snack Attack producers. That's Bill Gavertz, Rudy Schultz, Jamie Carbone, good dudes. They were having their 1 year anniversary show the same night as that show. But I had to be like, yo, guys, I'm going to be a little late. I got to do this college show. I don't want to rush away. It was like when it rains, it pours, Sareth. Like sometimes you want every gig in the world, and then sometimes the gigs all fall on the same fucking day. And that was such a, it was a little bit stressful because it's like I want to be here for the DePaul students. And what was cool about that first DePaul show that I did with Jenny Yang was so there's three Asian organizations there. They have Asian Cultural Exchange, that's ACE. Then they had SASA, which is South Asian Student Association. So again, the student associations are gearing these comedy events towards them, which is a little bit different than doing, the general college student association. They're geared towards that one student association. So budgets are going to be a little bit different, but also, there might be a message to those comedy shows. It's not just about the jokes. It's not just about doing Tinder jokes. You're here for maybe it's a celebration of diversity, or in the case of that event with Jenny Yang, it was about, it was May. It was Asian American History Month. So it was about bringing the plight of Asian Americans out in the open and celebrating the heritage. So you had a good mix of, alumni that were there as well. Also, what was the celebration for that event was they were launching the first ever Asian American fraternity. I believe they were Alpha Kappa. I believe it was Alpha Kappa Omega. I'm not super familiar with my Greek terminology, but it was definitely like an Alpha Kappa Omega situation. So that was really cool too. I'm doing jokes, but it becomes, Sareth, bigger than the jokes when you have an Asian American fraternity that had just launched. So to be a part of these kind of monumental occasions, it's definitely, it definitely puts the show a little bit, you put that set on a pedestal. But at the same time, because I had my Snack Attack anniversary show coming up, and that's a show where we literally, the Snack Attack shows where we, the headliner would choose like their favorite snack. So if they wanted like Cheetos or Nutty Buddy bars, we would buy the snack and then we would do the comedy show. And then right before they would go on, we'd not throw the snacks, but we'd like hand out the snacks to everybody. So it was like chaos. It was a very chaotic show, but a fun show, very delicious. So having that fun show to go to afterwards, that kind of put me in the right mindset for this monumental show. Because you do a show like a college show, you're going to be a little nervous. You're going to put, some pressure on yourself. You're going to put that show on a pedestal, and it can be nerve-wracking. But the fact that I had that fun anniversary show to look forward to, that kind of put me in that relaxed state. So, again, being in the right state of mind for these college shows, I think that's important. I think it's also important to talk to the student organizers beforehand, figure out content, and also just remember that, take it in that if I was a student at the show, what type of show would I want to see? So having all of those thoughts in your mind, that'll help make you a better college performer. And I do think there is a place for comedy in colleges. I don't think that it's something that we have to just, as performance, it's just PC crowds, we should not. No. I think there's a place for performing for any type of crowd. I think there's a way to do it. Now you certainly don't want to sacrifice your integrity as long as you can still be yourself, slightly modified. I think you should do whatever show you want. So to me, that's what I really learned from college performances, and I think they're valuable to any up and coming performer. And I hope, when this opens up again, I hope that colleges will still do college shows as well. I have done some Zoom college performances. They have been a little interesting, but I'll take the in-person shows over Zoom shows.
Absolutely. I did 2 Zoom shows and I was like, man, this is not the same Prateek. And it was, I don't even want to deal with this stuff. And it's just, I just miss that automatic feedback. And it just,
right. The automatic feedback of like, especially those college shows, like the instant feedback, like because those college kids, they're stressed out, they're studying for finals, whatever. So if you hit the right joke, it's like they explode with laughter. It feels like that Def Jam crowd where they're like stomping their feet and clapping, and it's kind of that hip hop thing of too, like, you want to, kind of play to the audience, making sure to connect with that audience in that way. And it's hard to do that over Zoom. How do you build that connection when they're muted half the time? Like, that's why when I do a Zoom show, I always say, like, hey, keep your cameras on, keep it unmuted. No, we're just gonna type one in the chat, and you have to play to the chat. Like, no, not playing to the chat. So
No way.
it's a challenge, Surratt. It's a challenge.
Absolutely. You spoke of Maz and Sammy, and you've also opened for Godfrey and Andy Kindler and Stuart Huff. And what was it like to perform, like, just performing with all those headliners?
Godfrey is. I don't think people give him enough credit as he is a monster beast of a performer. He did the NBC Breakout Festival at Second City. He was the host and MC for that, but he also ended up doing over an hour on that show. And he was doing was he would host. We did 3 shows. So the first show I did with him, he just headlined. So that was really cool. Second show he MC'd, and for that he was doing time in between. But because it's Godfrey, because he's such a master of the craft. I mean, I encourage anyone who's watching this, if you haven't checked out Godfrey, I would encourage you to see him live at some point. Whenever things open up again, do yourself a favor, go see Godfrey live. But even just, from a recording standpoint or a special standpoint, the man is a master of his craft. He's a master of the act out. This man knows how to do literally any accent around. I'm surprised Godfrey I'm surprised Godfrey doesn't have a prolific voiceover career, because his impressions are spot on. He can do a British accent. He can do an African accent. He can do a New York accent. He can do an Italian accent. And he doesn't just do the accent. He's not just like, hey, here's an Italian guy talking to an African guy. No, he's building the story and using the elements of his impressions as tools to amplify the story. So not only is he a master jokesmith, he's got to be a master storyteller. Then he's got to be a master impressionist. So to be able to work all these different move sets, he's kind of like Rob Van Dam, being a beefy guy, but being able to go off the top rope, being able to be a submission specialist. Got to be able to work a good brawl game too. I liken it to wrestling in that you got to be able to work a multiple move set while being aware of the ring psychology and playing to the crowd. So I think that's what Godfrey does best, is he knows how to play to the crowd. He knows how to read the room. He's doing, a host set, but he's doing 10 minutes in between every comic, and it's killing. That's a hosting no-no, right? You're not supposed to do 10 minutes in between every comic, but he's doing it and it's working and the crowd is into it. So clearly he's a master of his craft, that he knows the rules of stand-up and he's able to break them because he's that good of a performer. And, I just remember I was talking to him a little bit after the NBC breakout, and I was just like, first off, you're such a great performer, but also, I feel like weird as a fanboy right now that I'm wearing like Chappelle on my shirt. He's like, no, I have Chappelle on my shirts too, and I have a George Carlin t-shirt. Like, he loves talking about the art of stand-up. He loves talking shop, if you will. He's just a big fan of stand-up too, which is, let's be honest here. We all know comics who do stand-up who aren't a big fan of talking about stand-up, whereas me, I would love to talk stand-up. So to see that someone who is a prolific performer like Godfrey, who's worked all over the world, who's done everything, who's done Caroline's, The Cellar, who he gets those daps from, the greats. There's a video of Patrice O'Neal at one of, RIP Patrice O'Neal. There's a video of him at a barbecue where he's literally telling Godfrey, you're on the come up. You need to be doing this. The fact that he's getting that respect from Patrice O'Neal, in a time when Patrice O'Neal didn't give everybody, he wasn't dropping props to just any old comics, so Godfrey's gotten the respect from everybody. And so to be able to share the stage with him in any capacity between NBC breakout, whatever it was, I'm very grateful for that. I mean, he's a legendary performer, and I'm very lucky I got to see him live, before this all went down. I hope that, I hope everybody out there checks him out when we are able to see live stand up again, because he is a very talented joke writer. And Andy Kindler too. Fantastic. I got to perform with him at North Bar, which is a fantastic venue in Chicago. Aaron Putnam, who's a fantastic producer, he ran that show. He's a fantastic, Aaron Putnam has worked with Rich Voss, Robert Kelly. He works with a lot of the New York guys. I think he came up in New York. But yeah, this guy is a hustler, and he's a producer and he's hosting too. So imagine hosting a show and then doing all the production duties that you have to do, checking ticket sales, checking comps, making sure the comics are getting paid, So he is Aaron Putnam is a one-man wrecking crew of just so much production knowledge. And then as a performer too, he's got to go up and host too. Oof, he's doing everything. But yeah, that Andy Kindler show, Andy Kindler is he's kind of like an OG of the game. He's such a he gets such like he's kind of known as the comics comic, if you will, and he does like the State of the Union address at like Just for Laughs. But he's also just a great jokesmith. I think people kind of know him as like the cranky guy on Mark Maron's podcast, and he's done Bob's Burgers, but the man is a prolific joke writer as well. I don't think people give him enough credit for his joke writing skills. So yeah, to be able to work with him, he was so cool. And then, he'll talk to you after the show. He took pictures or whatever. My mom used to watch. My mom was a big Everybody Loves Raymond fan, and Andy Kindler was like one of the best friends on Everybody Loves Raymond. So I was like, hey man, my mom is a big fan of Everybody Loves Raymond. Do you mind? Like, she's on the phone. Can you just like say hi to her? And he was such a sweetheart. He talked to my mom for a couple minutes, and she told him she was a big fan of Everybody Loves Raymond. So he was super polite, and he's great too. Stuart Huff is like a road warrior. That guy, he lives the road. Like the man. And here's the thing, like he's working the southeast of this country, and he's such a progressive liberal. He's talking about evolution, but he's not just talking about evolution and all these sort of pro-choice, all these sort of liberal ideas. He's not just doing them in California. He's not just doing them in San Francisco. He's not just talking about gay rights in San Francisco. He's going to the South where he's from and talking to those audiences and talk about somebody who he's taking the political comedy and really trying to change the world and change people's mindsets and kind of open their thinking up. Is it kind of combative times? Yeah. And I do think it's a risk that he's taking, but more power to him for, going into these rooms and kind of going, it's kind of like a small wrestler fighting, Mark Henry or something, it's like that you're going up against, you're the underdog going against the heavyweight. He's the underdog going up in enemy territory. It's John Cena performing at the ECW arena for One Night Stand. It's kind of like that. Like he knows he's in enemy territory, but he's still going to get through the match. He's still going to get through the show, and he's going to try to educate those people. And so more power to Stuart Huff. These are all fantastic performers that I've gotten to open up for, and I love all of them. And that's not what I'm trying to do as I started to headline is, who can I bring as an opener, kind of elevate people. When I did my album recording, I obviously had a few guest spot openers on the album recording because I wanted to elevate them. I had Aaron McDavis, who I know who's been on this show, and he's a fantastic performer who, I think he doesn't get the credit that he's due. So I'm like, how can I elevate him? Jessica Miser, I had on my my late night album recording show. I'm like, she's a fantastic performer. How can I elevate her? And so the same way that all those openers, shared their stage time with me, because when someone like Andy Kindler is headlining, he doesn't need to have 4 openers on his show. He can just do 1 opener and do his set, and that's it. He's allowing openers to come into his time. He's sharing the stage with them, and you got to appreciate that. And the same way that as I start headlining, I want to start sharing the stage with them, paying it forward as well. One quick thing I'll say on openers real quick, as I mentioned Maz Jobrani earlier. He did a cool thing. He was headlining the Skokie Theater. He did a cool thing at the end of his headlining set they didn't have to do is he did a curtain call. He had all the openers come out at the end of his headlining set to take a bow, and he wanted to share the applause with the openers. He did not have to do that. Those people were there strictly for Maz Jobrani. But for him to do a curtain call with all the openers that night, very generous with the stage time, and that's something I won't forget. Being a headliner, nationally touring headliner like that, and allowing the openers to share that stage with you at the end, I don't see that too often, and so I'm very grateful for that. And that's something I always appreciate with these opening opportunities.
Absolutely. And when you said that John Cena going to enemy territory and the ECW arena, I was like, the first thing that popped in my mind when you said that was like, if John Cena wins, we riot. That sign, that comment, or one of the fans held up. I'm like, dang, I remembered watching that. I just love ECW. And a true story is like I had the sign that said, please sign my sign. And WWE just bought ECW, and they just came to my hometown for like a house show.
Oh, nice.
And then I held it up, and then like it caught Sabu's eye, and he came up and he signed it, and we took photos. And then like Sandman came out, and RVD, and like some other people came out too, and it was just so neat just to make it like, please sign my sign, and they
And they
actually
signed
did.
it. Sabu is awesome. Yeah, big ups to Sabu. Big ups to RVD. I know RVD has started doing some stand up stuff too. You know, I know he'll work with this guy Tom Garland out of Iowa, and he starts to do, obviously, you know, he might not be doing classic stand up per se, but he's telling stories that are funny for an hour. And to me, good for RVD. You know, I actually did a radio show where they were asking questions to RVD. This was when his documentary come out, Headstrong, about the concussions and all. So I got to ask him. I asked him, like, you know, how, because the one thing I'm always curious about, these, you know, Mick Foley, and I know Dolph Ziggler started to do stand up too, and some of these wrestlers who are doing stand up now, is how does the stand up high of performing high from stand up, how does that compare with the wrestling high? Is it the same? Is it comparable? I don't know. I mean, you know, headlining the ECW arena with John Cena, I think that might be more important to Rob Van Dam than, you know, doing 20 minutes at the Chuckle Hut. You know what I mean? I don't know if that compares. I mean, Rob Van Dam is cool. I mean, I didn't go to WrestleMania 22 in Chicago, but that was the one that he won Money in the Bank at. And I just remember watching that match and being like, yeah, RVD is, for his size, he's such an agile performer. I don't think he gets enough credit. I hope his career's not done. I don't know. I hope he comes back for a couple more matches. He needs that. Big ups to RVD.
Big ups to RVD for sure.
I would love to open for him. I would, yeah. Mick Foley, RVD, and I would just do my wrestling jokes. I have no problem just doing a dumb little 5-minute wrestling jokes. I have no problem with that.
Indeed, and the wrestling business has writers and stuff and cast members.
Oh, absolutely! Oh my god, so many comedy fans come out of the wrestling. There's this. It's called WrestleZone. Comedian Kevin Kellum. He's a comedian, but he's also a radio DJ, and he's also the wrestling host for WrestleZone. And he's had me on. He's had a couple other comedians on. He's had Mike O'Keefe on, and Kevin Kellum did your show as well. Both Kevin Kellum and Mike O'Keefe have done your show. I just realized. I feel like I've mentioned somebody. As I'm saying somebody's name, like, oh yeah, they've done this show too. But yeah. Kevin Kellum does WrestleZone. He's had me on a bunch of times. So shout out to both of them. They're wrestling fans too. And it's crazy, the wrestling comedian cross section. And I know people think it's hacky, but fuck that. No, there should be more wrestlers who are comedy fans. There should be more comedians that like wrestling. I'm always for that.
Absolutely, indeed. And it's so true. It's like, and I've had like almost 100 episodes of the Stand Speakeasy, and like 50% are from Chicago, and like the scene. So it's such an amazing scene up there. That's why I love it. And you know, you're a writer and a cast member for POV sketch comedy show at Chicago's famed Improv Olympic IO for the locals there. It was directed by Michael McCarthy, and he also performed in the sketch shows Okay Stupid, I love that name, and Little Me, Little You at Second City. And what are some of your favorite memories from all those sketches?
That's the thing, and I'm glad you brought that up. You know, it's about finding a way to diversify your acting tool belt, if you will. Stand up is just one, you know, it's just one thing you can do. I think it's good to be able to do different types of forms. You know, I've trained in improv as well, but I've just found for me personally that improv has its ups and downs. You know, I respect the art form, but I found sketch is where I've been able to thrive a little bit more. POV, that came about because I was taking a pilot writing class at the Improv Olympic Theater, which unfortunately at this time is no longer around. They still have the writing classes though. Look up the Comedy Lab for anybody out there. They have a great writing program that was created and curated by Michael McCarthy. Unfortunately, he passed away last year, but he had a specific way that he wanted people to write for TV, film. He had specific guidelines to his program. These were 8-week classes where you would design your pilot idea, TV pilot idea, movie. Well, the movie one was 16 weeks because screenplays take longer. But your TV pilot or your late night writing packet or your sketch packet class, you would design it over the 8 weeks. But you would also do, every week you had a writing assignment and you have a business assignment. The business assignment would be draft a letter that you can send to an agent. So the fact that he married those two concepts of the business side of arts and the art side of arts, I thought that was amazing. The fact that he curated this 8-week program accordingly. And, you know, he also was very much about like, hey, you want to be a writer, but you need to be able to perform your material too. Like, so for the pilot writing class, the end project, the end recital, if you will, was a staged reading of your pilot script, which for me, as a stand-up, I'm like, oh, great. You mean we get to perform this too in front of an audience, getting that audience feedback? I was a fan on board of his writing style immediately because I'm like, hey, this is exactly what I want. It's the comic in me to want to go test out these jokes naturally. But with the script, it's hard to find a way to test out those jokes immediately. You're not able to just, you can do a table reading, you can do a reading, but it wasn't something that I originally thought about. So to have this opportunity to do a stage reading in front of a crowd, it was amazing. So I wrote this pilot. I went through his program. Also, side note, we started with 14 people in the writing class. Only 3 to 4 people completed the final project. We lost like 10 people just from not wanting to commit. They weren't able to finish all the assignments in time, So it shows that these classes aren't the easiest things to do. You got to be able to commit to writing. Writing is a discipline, just like anything else, Surratt. You know this from music journalism. You have to hit those deadlines. You can't just, oh, I'll get to it when I get to it. Nope, you gotta get it done at the time you need to. Just with pilot script, you get on a writing staff, you get on a sitcom staff, and you have to write a script. They'll throw you out if you don't have it in time. They'll say, nope, you got to hit the road. So you got to stick to those deadlines. So to me, that was the discipline of that class that I loved. Doing that class, I started building a relationship with Michael McCarthy, who he is on his own. Just on his own, he's a prolific writer. He's written for Saturday Night Live. He's written for Sesame Street. He's written so many pilots. He worked on 2.5 Men and Mike and Molly. He famously contributed to the the Eddie Murphy sketch, James Brown, Too Hot in the Hot Tub. He helped write that sketch. That's probably his defining. He's written for a lot of cool things, but that's a sketch that he's really well known for. Prolific writer just on his own. But the fact that he's willing to give back and teach what he feels is, his method of writing, fantastic. So to be able to sit under the tree of his knowledge, we'll go back to wrestling. I equate him to kind of like a Paul Heyman, if you will. Like he's kind of like, this sort of mentor that you can learn from. So he was talking with me about how he would do a weekly review called POV. This was like, the week's topical events, and people from his writing classes could submit a sketch, and then a team of actors would read through the sketch on Thursday. They would do a kind of rehearsal blocking for 2 hours on Friday, take the weekend to memorize the sketches, and then from Monday, we go from 12 noon to 6:30 p.m., just like a gauntlet, like multiple gauntlet matches, just running through the material from 12, that's 6.5 hours of rehearsal. And then at 7 o'clock, so 6:30, and then 7 o'clock, so a half-hour break to get your head clear. And then 7 o'clock, you'd run through the show for an hour. So you're learning that material with less than a week's time, and then just constantly running it, constantly rehearsing, going through the professional aspects of theater, which is, your tops and bottoms. You enter from stage left and exit from stage right, learning the discipline of that form. It's like wrestling in Japan. That's how I equate it. I do a lot of wrestling analogies, Surratt, so I hope you enjoy them. But it's like being in WWE and then going to Japan to learn, submission style or something. It's learning a different skill, but something that can help me in comedy. So it was, to me, it was the greatest form of acting. Like, it was the greatest sort of acting class that I could learn. As a stand-up, I've been doing stand-up at that point for 8 years. So my primary function as a performer was stand-up. So for me, I wasn't coming in with like years of Meisner and all those Lee Strasberg theater techniques. I was coming in as a stand-up. I knew how to stand on stage, and I knew how to emote. I knew how to, execute emotions in a certain stand-up light. I didn't know how to execute emotions from an acting light. So I'm, it's unfortunate that he's no longer around, but I'm grateful for the time that I had with them at POV, that weekly sketch show. We went from I think I came on in June of 2017. And we went till about, 2018, 2019. That's when POV kind of had to take a break because of his sort of health concerns. But through that, I started working with a few other cast members that were part of POV. One of them was Patrick Newson, who he's still around, and he was the one who directed Okay Stupid. That was basically a sketch show, but it was a compilation of Valentine's Day and dating stories, but he made it he took these random stories and made them into a coherent narrative. And for him to do that as a writer and then direct this cast of 8-9 people, insane, and to do that, we started rehearsing in December, but unfortunately, I was sick in December, so I wasn't able to rehearse with them. So I didn't start rehearsing with the cast until mid-January. and we did these shows the first 2-3 weeks. We did them the first 3 weeks of February because it was like, Valentine's Day themed. So with only 2 or 3 weeks of rehearsal, it wasn't easy, but he led a very talented cast. People like Marissa Chastain, Preston O'Phil. These are all fantastic sketch performers that I've been lucky enough to perform with, and I'm grateful to just be under their tutelage. These are people who, I think a lot of stand-ups are poo-poo to the mind of, oh, like I never understood when some stand-ups like, oh, I don't really take tags, or I'm not open to doing a sketch or something. Like, the things you learn in sketch will also come back to help you in stand-up. I would recommend any stand-up that's burned out or not sure what to do right now because things are kind of closed off. Take an improv class, take an acting class. You never know what skills, even if you never even go to improv, even if you never even go into acting, that acting skill might just help you back with your stand-up. Go back to Godfrey. Godfrey is an immense impressionist and good voice actor. He probably took acting. I know he had started as an actor. I know it's his acting skills that definitely helped him as a stand-up as well. So even if you don't go into those other disciplines, having those skills in your tool belt will only help you as a stand-up. So for just the very reason of helping your stand-up, why not do those opportunities? Why not take those opportunities to be in a sketch show? Why not take those opportunities to take an improv class? So I'm very grateful for my cast members and to be able to learn from them. Oh, and they would say things like, oh yeah, some actors were with their sensitive to take notes and they don't want direction. I'm like, no, please give me direction. Give me the tag. Give me whatever. I look at it like someone's giving me a tag or something for a joke. Like, I want every note I could get. When Michael McCarthy, when he was still around, I was happy to get his direction. And some people would be like, oh man, Michael McCarthy was tough in his direction. Not at all. I want to hear what the director has to say. Because here's the thing that people don't think about. Yeah, he's giving you notes and he wants you to do it a certain way, but he only wants you to maximize your performance for the audience. He would literally give us, I can't even extrapolate these details, but he would give you like the slightest thing of like, say this line this way, take this pause after this one word this way. And it would make the joke, even just the joke in the sketch, 10 times funnier. So to me, that was what was so prolific about POV, Monday Night Live, all these different opportunities to perform is they help me be a better performer, not just in my stand-up, but I've been able to do some acting things. I got to do some sketches for the Pat Tomasulo show. Shout out to him. He's a WGN anchor who does stand-up as well. But all my acting experience came from doing POV and doing OK Stupid and doing these things at Second City and IO. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to branch out from just doing stand-up. If I just did stand-up, I think that would just be boring. And to be able to have these other opportunities, they're only going to make your desire to do stand-up stronger. You have less chance of getting burned out. And it also just makes you better stand-up. So why not? So I look back on all these things and I'm so grateful to do them. We actually did a version of Monday Night Live on Zoom. And as we talked about earlier, so Zoom is not the same thing. Now imagine telling jokes on Zoom. Now imagine doing a sketch on Zoom. That's a whole other level of, it was a whole other level of hell. But, big ups to Preston O'Phil and Dwayne Deering and Marissa Chastain because they helped make that Zoom show. It was the best of a not ideal situation. That's what I'll say about it. Is we had fun doing it in the best way we could.
Indeed, and particularly you were also on, when you're not on performing on stage and in sketches, and you appeared on WGN TV and NPR. And what was those experiences like?
Yeah, NPR, they did a thing about it's called Race Out Loud. It was about sort of interracial dating. What I love about doing like stuff with WBZ and NPR. I did also the Jill Hopkins show in promotion for Breakout, MCC Breakout. Every time you go, perform in that studio, it's fantastic. They have their studio in Navy Pier. Navy Pier is like the big tourist attraction in Chicago. So to be able to go get in that studio, first off, going through Navy Pier is insane because there's an IMAX theater there. There's the Ferris wheel. It's like being in a mall. You're getting lost. To find that studio is a hike and a trek just to find that studio. But yeah, anytime doing radio, I love it. Anytime I can, even a show like this, to be able to talk about comedy, to talk about the platform, you never know who you're gonna, you might find fans from this. I've had high school friends say, "Oh, I was listening to NPR and your voice showed up," and to be able to reconnect with people through that. Yeah, it can be kind of, some people could take it in an egocentric kind of way, but I don't. I look at it, I'm just grateful for, hey, people are listening to me. Hey, I might get some new Twitter followers out of it. I might get some new Instagram followers out of it. It's just another opportunity for me to share my experiences. So that was the cool thing about NPR. That was the cool thing about WGN. That was the Pat Tomasulo show that I mentioned earlier. The thing I did from that's still on my website is I played, he's a Trump lackey who went to jail. His name was George Papadopoulos. Funny enough, I learned he went to DePaul University as well. I found out I performed as another DePaul alum. And he had gone to jail, but he was only going to jail for like 14 days. So it was like a fake trailer for a prison documentary about being in jail for 14 days. So they're like, hey, we don't know anyone who's Greek. Can you just play Greek? And I'm like, I'll play Greek. So I basically played George Papadopoulos. I cut my hair and I had a shorter haircut because he had a shorter hair. But it was fun. We got to tape. We didn't tape an actual jail cell. What we did was we found an escape room in Chicago that had a jail setting. And that was really cool because I got to work with this writer who's named T. Sean Shannon. He got to write for SNL. He wrote this movie called Bear City, which Dave Attella's in and Colin Quinn are in. And it's a really cool movie. I would check it out, Bear City. And he also wrote this movie called The Adventures of Harold, which is about a 13-year-old teenager who's bald. It's so fucking funny. So you got to work with such a prolific, again, I'm lucky that my stand-up and being in the stand-up community allowed me this opportunity to work on WGN. And again, it was an acting thing. It was a sketch. So again, you're taking notes from a sketch writer like T. Sean Shannon. Again, a director, being able to take notes from the director, make the script adjustments that he wants. And with that sketch, George Papadopoulos, there was very little lines. It was all just kind of improv ad-lib. He's like, yeah, we just need you to say this thing about how the jail cell is like this. And then I ad-libbed a line about how the jail cell is smaller than, or the jail cell is bigger than most studio apartments in Chicago. So again, getting the chance to ad-lib, getting a chance to work in my own type of dialogue. It was fantastic. It was wonderful. I'm grateful for all these opportunities because again, TV opportunities, I need TV things for my acting reels so I can, do more things that way. So it's I encourage anybody who's listening to this that if you're doing stand-up or if you're doing acting, I would always branch out and do the other thing. If you're an actor, if you're doing Lee Strasberg and Meisner technique, do some stand-up. And if you're a stand-up and you're working, try to take an acting class. Like you don't know what that other class would lead to. I got to do POV and all that sketch stuff because I took a class. It wasn't the intention. I was just taking the class because I was burned out. And I was like, I need something else to do. So I think, if you're ever feeling burned out in this art form, and that's going to happen, I think that's natural in anything, find a way to branch out, find a way to mix it up. You're doing your music journalism, you're doing all these different things, podcasting, video recording, video interviewing. And I think that's important. I think having a variety of projects will keep you motivated in this industry because this industry can be depressing at times, especially kind of right now when you can do stand up, you can kind of do it, you can't. So this is a great opportunity to do different types of work, create different types of content too. And like I said, if anything, this content creation and all these different classes, at the very least, they might make you a better stand-up. At the very least.
Absolutely. And I love David Tell because he's like the comics comic, and he spoke of the other comics comic, and like I love, like, my buddies in Daytona call me the comics comic because even though that even if the audience doesn't laugh at my jokes, they laugh at my jokes, and sometimes they rally the troops in from the back patio from smoking, and it's like
Hells to the yeah.
Hell yeah. And they know that, that punchline and those tags are coming, and they just love looking at the audience reactions when they hear it for the first time and how like disgusted by it they get. That's what they love the most about my stand-up, and that's what I love about stand-up. And it's like, and you spoke with DePaul University, and my pal, my old stand-up comedy sidekick, attended there, and he's a Chicago comic, but I think he moved back down to Jacksonville. I don't know, but he might be in Chicago still.
Yeah.
But he gave me the best nickname when we were performing in Jacksonville. He called me the poet laureate of Pornhub because I was so dirty. So.
Hells yeah. Dave Attell had that porn show. Dave's old porn too. So there you go.
Absolutely, indeed.
Dave Attell had a great quote. He said at one point, I think it was on Maron's podcast, where he talked about how, comics are like, oh man, I smoke up to get inspiration. And Dave Attell was just like, comics are hitting the bong, but comics need to hit the notebook too. Like, he was just of the mind that, yeah, you want to have fun, smoke up, do whatever you want, but make sure you're still writing too. And there's no greater to me purveyor of writing than Dave Attell. He was a master writer. I mean, that guy was like a joke machine, fucking fantastic. So for him to say that, I think everybody should take those words to heart. That, yeah, have fun, do your whatever, but make sure you're still hitting the notebook too. Make sure you're still writing.
Absolutely, indeed, and I loved how like your album's called the EP is called "Read the Room," and that's what I had to do last night because Jacksonville and Florida's opened up. Like we don't care about the pandemic
Yeah.
or nothing, and like the first two comics that went up, the host hosted and he bombed and got heckled. The second one came up and he got he didn't do so well and he got heckled, and the third was me, and I'm like I don't even know what the crowd wants, so I'm just gonna come out and say it. Like, what do you guys want to hear? Because I gave up my new jokes and they didn't laugh. And I'm like, all right, guys, do you want my dirty jokes? I'm like, yes, we want your dirty jokes. And I had like 2 applause breaks. I'm like, all right, this is fantastic. Did my
Good
5
for
minutes,
you.
got off stage. So what was it like to record your EP, Read the Room, and your comedy album, Nick and Sheila's Kid?
Oh
And
yeah.
let's dive into those.
Let's dive into those. Yeah. And to your point, reading the room, that literally that phrase that came from this idea of, yeah, you have every show, every audience is different. I think it's great when comics, have a set list of what jokes they're trying to do. And I think that's great every time. But for me, when I go into a set, depending on the set, obviously, like we've talked about NBC showcasing, for those sets, especially like if it's a 6-minute set, I have a really strong idea of what I'm doing because it's 6 minutes. It's tight. There's not a lot of, you can wiggle room a little bit, but 6 minutes goes by, and this, right? Like 6 minutes goes by like that. So there's not a lot of wiggle room for 6 minutes set. But if I have 10 minutes, if it's a bar show, if it's like, like a black box theater, an annoyance theater, if you will, something like that, where, these audiences are sort of, they know what's going on. Now, if it's an improv show, that's different because they're dealing with improv or whatever. So you kind of have to come in guns blazing. But I like to go in with like a beginning plan of which I'm going to start with, and then an ending joke that I kind of know I'm going to end on. Then in the middle, I have a variety of jokes I'll do, and I'll just kind of read the room, again, to go back to wrestling, calling the match in the ring, if you will, a little bit of that too, see what works, yeah, ask especially if, you try a couple things and not working, just be like, okay, what do you guys want to hear? I've done the thing where I do like the I'll play like multiple choice. And I'm like, hey, do you guys want to hear about monoxide detectors or lube? Like, I'll kind of give people choices because you still want to control it a little bit too. But I'm proud of you for like being like, yo, what do you guys want to hear? And it worked, obviously. So to me, there's something to be said about, sometimes if something's not working for the crowd, fucking ask them what they want to hear. You got to do that sometimes because like crowd work is obviously a go-to for, people. Like, that's a safety net, if you will. And I'll be frank, I like crowd work sometimes, but I like, to me, crowd work shouldn't just be, hey, where are you from? Or, hey, who you fucking? Or like making fun of the guy in the audience who's there by himself. I'm not the hugest fan of that. I'm not judging any comics that do that. More power to you, but that's not my personal cup of tea. I like to build the audience up. I really don't like roasting the audience, quote unquote, unless they're heckling or they're being obnoxious on their own. I try to build up the audience. So I'm not really like, hey, who's fucking? Or, hey, who's fucking? Or, oh, I see you're by yourself. Fuck you. You're not fucking. That's not, I'm not a fan of that type of crowd work. I'm more of a fan of like, hey, what was the weirdest job you ever had? Or what's like, what do you hate about your relationship right now? Or something like dumb, like not dumb questions, but pointed questions, specific questions. I'm a big fan of like asking specifics, or like I'll ask the crowd sometimes like, hey, if you go back in time and tell your 10-year-old self one piece of advice, what would you do? Like I'll ask the crowd, like when I'm doing crowd work, that's what I love to ask. It's like really deep and kind of philosophical questions too, in a way. Like that's what excites me about crowd work. So yeah, I think when it comes to reading the room, you have to really figure out what does this crowd want. And so that's a mantra I've lived by. So for the EP, and I have to shout out my producer, Dave Winnick, who he's the one who produced my both of my albums. We wanted to kind of release an appetizer for the main album, Nick and Sheila's Kid, something for the Spotify audience, kind of build Spotify traction, build traction on iTunes, build traction on Amazon charts as well. So Read the Room, for those of you that, if you've listened to it or if you've looked it up, it's only 8 minutes. It's not, there have been people who are like, is that your album? No, that's an appetizer. That's like not a fortune cookie. That's that's like the egg roll before the main course. It's 8 minutes, but it's not one set. It's 8 minutes, like taken, like kind of like a Frankenstein, taken from different performances. One of the performances is taken from my East Meets Midwest shows that we did for Caroline's. Then it's taken a little bit from the late show of my album recording, because we did two shows for my album recording, Nick and Sheila's Kid. But yeah, it's a combination of material that I feel is raw. There's a little bit of unpolished to it, but it speaks to the point of reading the room. It's material that I did in the moment to showcase that this is material that you do to read the room. So actually what's interesting about some of the material on that EP is it's material that is featured in the album, but done differently, and it's tagged up differently, and it's delivered differently, delivered with different energy styles and different tones. So to me, it's, for those that listen to it, I want you to see the evolution in that material. And I want people, especially comics and comedy fans, to take away from that read the room is that, hey, there are ways to deliver material in different ways. So when you listen to Nick and Sheila's Kid, you might hear my jokes about wrestling, but you're going to be like, oh, he delivered that wrestling joke on Read the Room differently than they did on Nick and Sheila's Kid. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point of it, is that, for the wrestling joke in particular, I'll ask the audience, hey, who's your favorite wrestler? And then I'll get answers like Rob Van Dam or Shawn Michaels or whatever. And to me, that's what made that different, that joke a little more unique. Whereas on the album, it was delivered differently. So to me, that's something that you don't see a lot of that when it comes to stand-up albums. You don't see like people putting on jokes, but delivering the evolution of that joke. And to me, because this is my first foray into my EP and my LP, I thought, yeah, let's do something where somebody can see they can see the evolution of a joke. They can see how a comedian changes a joke. The way you tell a joke a year from now might be different, if you're still telling jokes. Some jokes stick around, some jokes go away. I know the Chris Rock, George Carlin, Louis C.K., Bill Burr school of thought is you do a special and then you graduated from that material and you don't do that material again. And for the most part, I've graduated from that material, but we're still showcasing, we're going to come back eventually and do NBC showcases or whatever showcases or late night sets or whatever. And there's still some material from Nick and Sheila's Kid that I may do for some of these showcases as well, because I think I haven't done this material on TV. So to me, it's still viable to do. So, but again, if I do it on a late night set, it'll sound different than how it is on the album. And to me, that's the beauty of stand-up. That's the beauty of Read the Room. That's the beauty of reading a situation, reading a different audience. You deliver a joke on the Conan O'Brien show, it's going to be different than delivering a joke when opening for Mick Foley. It's going to be, those are two different audiences just by the nature of design of those audiences. So to me, that's what's so beautiful about comedy is you deliver jokes differently each time. And from a personal standpoint too, I would be bored if I had to deliver a joke the same way every time. Like, more power to some of these comics who can deliver a stand-up set in a certain order every time they do a show, because I'm not like that. I don't think you're like that either. Like, I love being able to mix up the order. I mean, even when I did my actual album taping, I had a general rough idea of, okay, start with these jokes, you're going to end on these jokes, but I still played a little bit with the middle on the recording. I think that was important to me, that make these sets feel unique to this situation. The treat really is you're getting to see something in the moment that won't be replicated later. Even the people that were at the actual tapings, they got something special that, you can't necessarily get if you weren't there. And that's the point. The point is to encourage people to keep coming back, keep seeing me live. I know some comics who maybe aren't necessarily a fan of putting on an album. They're of the mind that, yeah, I only want you to see me live. Now, at some point down the road, I think it's important to have a milestone of your progress, track your progress, sort of a fossil record of what you've done. WrestleManias are great live, but you also want to be able to go back and watch WrestleManias on the network or whatever. You want a record of that too. So yeah, that's why I felt that it was time to put out an album. And so my producer, Dave Winnick, of St. Dude Productions, was like, he had been encouraging me to do an album since 2018, but I was like, I want to be able to do it when I feel comfortable. So what happened was my 10-year anniversary was April of 2020. And the original plan, Sareth, was to do the album recording in April of 2020. Hindsight is 2020. I'm glad we didn't wait that long, because I would not have been able to do that recording if I'd waited till 2020. So we were thinking of other times to record it. I was thinking, okay, it was like October of 2019. I was like, you know what? October, November, let's do December. December is my birthday month. I was born December 2nd. It's just a good juju, good luck, good prosperous month for me. Let's do it in December. But I was like, you know what? Wait. The second and third weekend in December is when holiday parties happen. So let's try to do the first weekend in December. Okay, what's the first Saturday in December? What date is that? You know what date it was? December 7th, 2019. December 7th happens to be my parents' wedding anniversary. And the album is called Nick and Sheila's Kid. So I named the album after my parents, and I recorded it on their wedding anniversary. So I'm like, this is some sort of like, I don't know how spiritual you are, but I'm like, there's some sort of sign. All signs are pointing that I better record this album on December 7th. So we locked in that date. We went with the Bughouse Theater, which is where I used to do my show Simmer Brown, which I ran with another South Asian producer. We were both South Asian. We were both, loud South Asian people, which is why we need to do Simmer Down or Simmer Brown. That was the name of that show. And the Bughouse Theater is a great venue. It's kind of like a it's a black box theater. It's a sketch theater, but it seats 75 to 80 people. So it's a low ceiling venue, but again, intimate. You can fit 75 to 80 people comfortably. BYOB, which is comedy's best friend. I truly believe that. And a venue that I'm comfortable with. That's another tip too. If you're going to record a special, try to find a venue that you're relatively comfortable with. I think that's important too. So yeah, we went with that venue. We signed it up. We locked it in. What ended up happening, and this is something I've not told I don't think I've really shared this. So you're getting some exclusives here, Sareth. But I ended up doing a show the day before. So I recorded on December 7th. December 6th, I fly from Chicago to New Jersey to perform at the United Airlines pilot holiday party. This was just a gig that I picked up. And I'm like, you know what? It's United Airlines. It's a very prestigious company to perform for. It's a good gig. But I was also like, and here's the thing with United Airlines. So they were covering the flight. But I was like, hey, guys, you're covering my flights. I need a flight first thing out Saturday morning. I don't want to come in the afternoon. I want to be able to fly out Saturday morning because if I get delayed, this whole album thing is going to, get delayed. So I got to fly out first thing in the morning Saturday. So they were able to provide me that again because it was United Airlines. We were able to make that work. But I'll be honest, I was a little worried flying out to do this gig. And then, is this going to tire me out? Shouldn't I be running my material before the album recording? I'll be honest, I was a little nervous. Like, what do I do? Do I take this gig? Ultimately, I decided to take the gig, and I think it helped. I think doing that corporate gig, there were some content restrictions. It allowed me to do a set that did have some material from the album on it. It was a controlled set. It was again, a set that read the room. But by the time I got back and I could do my album recording, those content restrictions are lifted because it's my album recording. But I think having that other set where I was restricted allowed me to feel more free when it came time for the album. It allowed me to go balls to the wall, allowed me to have an ECW one night stand show for the album recording. And I truly believe that helps. So maybe that is a secret. In addition to being a good comic and an experienced comic is having a corporate event or a private event or some sort of college gig the night before to kind of free yourself up for your actual album recording. But for me, it was the perfect weekend because, I really, you're loving these wrestling references, but the United Airlines show, that was the Friday before Mania. That was the SmackDown before Mania. Then WrestleMania was the album recording. And then on Sunday, after my album recording, I went back to Milwaukee Comedy Festival. All those wonderful people, and I performed at the Lakefront Brewery, and I headlined that show. And that was the Raw after Mania. That's how I really equate that weekend. It's one of my favorite weekends in comedy, Sareth, is that whole weekend. You have the private event, being flown in, staying in a hotel, performing for United Airlines holiday party. It was a cool experience, and to be able to do that and then do the album recording. We had 2 sold out shows. Again, thank you to whoever came to the shows. I really appreciate it. We couldn't have done the shows without everybody showing up. So to have a lot of comics there as well, having my peers support me that night, I'm very grateful. So to have that, and then to be able to close out that weekend headlining in Milwaukee, Wisconsin with Greg Bach and, Matt Kemple and Caitlin McCarthy, my good friends from Milwaukee. It was a great experience. So yeah, it's a weekend I look back on very fondly. Putting together the material for that album, it was 10 years in the making, it was. And I think when people, because I've had people ask me, Sareth, how do you know you were ready for an album? I think you should wait. I don't think you need to jump at an album the first chance you get. I think you do need to wait a little bit. Dave Winnick, my producer, asked me in 2018. I didn't take him up until the end of 2019, December. So I think sometimes you do have to wait. I think it's not just about putting out an album for the sake of putting out an album. The album is called Nick and Sheila's Kid because I'm paying tribute to my parents, but also the through line of that material, the emotional theme that I found is my family. So to me, it made sense that now was the time to put out this album. There was a through line to this material. There was material that I did at the recording that did not make the album because it didn't fit that theme, but it's material that I can use to build my next hour. So to me, it was all about all those factors lining up. It's, do I have material that works for me? Does it fit this theme? And then obviously doing that material, doing the finished product of the recording, and then going back in the editing of recording and figuring out what works to make it a good album. We did 2 shows. I did almost hour 20 on both shows. And it was a lot of material to cull through to figure out what works, but we had a great time. Anthony Bonazzo, who's been on your show, he was the MC for that show. Wonderful comedian. Aaron McDavis, who I mentioned earlier, he was the opener. Chris Santiago, who's been on your show, he did the beautiful artwork for Nick and Sheila's Kid. The artwork that you see, which is me and my parents when I was younger, beautiful artwork he did. Preston O'Phil, who I know through POV, he helped take tickets. Dwayne Deering from POV, he helped with a few things. But it's just it's so wonderful to work with all these fantastic people from POV, Patrick Newsom from POV. Whether they helped out or they showed up, it was kind of like a culmination of everything. So to have all these people from all these different disciplines in my life showing up, it meant the world to me. It really did.
Indeed. And, you mentioned that you were a December baby, and, with the 2 and the 7, that's my birthday, December 27th. And December,
look at that.
It's a beautiful month. And
it is a beautiful month. Are you now 27th? Would you be considered Sagittarius, or you? What are you?
Capricorn.
Capricorn. There you go. But you know what? We're all related. It's all the same thing.
Absolutely, and it's so dope that you have 2 albums, and with the Read the Room was like a Frankenstein style with all those different pieces, and I recorded my album, a 30-minute album in Daytona at a pool hall, but all the billiard tables were in the very back, and you could hear my pals laughing because they were close to the mic that I was the recorder I was on. And then now I'm the second album I'm doing an hour, but it's like a Frankenstein, if you will, with 12 open mic sets of 5-minute sets, and it's so crazy. I didn't expect to repeat jokes, but what I do is I do my new stuff in the front, and then I take requests from the crowd, and I usually get the requests from the comics, and they go, "We want this joke on this," and I'm like, "It's the same joke from the track 1 and track 4. What the heck?" And I'm like, "All right, fine, I'll just put it all in there." So
just put it all in there. You can't question the moment. Then you can play with it in editing.
Absolutely, indeed. And so
what I wanted to do was for the album I was originally, and we'll have to do that on the next album, is we were going to try to do a skit or 2 in between, kind of like in hip hop style, so that's definitely something I want to do on my next few specials, is to have some sort of mix of sketch within the stand-up performance as well. I think that's important too.
I would love that. I would love to hear that, and it's so neat. And for this episode, it'd be pretty neat if you had Chris Rock and Trace Morgan hop on that album.
Yeah, that'd be so cool. There's this comedian Ted Alexandro who he did something similar where he was like, yeah, hip hop artists have guest spots, but where are my guest spots? And so literally on his half-hour Comedy Central, Dave Attell and Andy Kindler, they show up to do a joke on a guest spot. So if you look up Ted Alexandro guest spot, that's such a cool. But it'd be great to have Chris Rock just jump on for, hey, Chris Rock, can you get a guest track on this joke? I want to hear his thoughts on President Biden for this guest spot on this track. It'd be great. Yeah,
indeed, absolutely.
We need more of that for sure. It was cool to do the album, and then we released it almost a year. So we released it last December 22nd. So December 2/2, that's what we were looking at. And I'll be honest, we were like, when do we release it? Because we had finished it in the summer of 2020, but with the protests going on and sort of the political landscape, I just felt that it would be better to release it later in the year when, people will be able to appreciate a little bit more. And I'm very grateful for the timing of when we released it. It was a good timing to release it because we were, knock on wood, blessed be to whoever you believe in, but we were able to reach number one on both iTunes and Amazon's with the album. So I'm very grateful for that. And it was, we were actually, John Mulaney had an album that he had an album that was tracking very well because he was in the news. So, it was kind of nerve wracking that, John Mulaney's this big deal. I'm just Prateek Srivastava. I've been on NPR, he's done all these cool things. So to be able to, still reach number one, big ups to John Mulaney. I hope he's obviously doing better on whatever is. I hope he feels better with all his sort of personal problems he's dealing with. But yeah, shout out to John Mulaney and shout out to everybody who bought the album. I think that's important. I give a lot of shout outs, right? But it's kind of like hip hop radio too, in a way too. There's a lot of hip hop and wrestling elements to a lot of what I do. But yeah, shout out to all those people. And yeah, we couldn't have done the album without you. Again, you can't do stand up and you can't do an album without your fans who come watch you and then who come buy the album as well. So I got to thank everybody for checking out the album. It means a lot. It means more than these people will ever know. I really appreciate it.
Indeed. And for this episode that we're recording for the Stand Up Speakeasy, we're raising funds for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And what made you pick those fine folks to raise funds for?
I mean, St. Jude's Children's Hospital, it's a fantastic hospital. They really are working towards being a charitable hospital in terms of, when somebody is admitted there, they cover their travel costs, their living costs, anytime anyone deals with a medical procedure, none of that stuff is cheap. As we all know, healthcare in this country is, it's extraordinarily costly and extraordinarily expensive. And so St. Jude's really, all the donations that they accept are going towards paying for people's procedures, paying for the children's procedures. To me, we need to support more hospitals like that, especially when the healthcare industry is so problematic. To see something like St. Jude's Children's Hospital stand out against that and be a charitable hospital, really exude the qualities of being a hospital, which is we take care of the sick and the needy, no matter what sort of insurance they have. To me, that's a charity. It's near and dear to my heart. It was near and dear to my grandparents' heart as well. My grandparents are no longer around. And one thing in my family that's a tradition is when a grandparent passes away, you make a donation in their name. And we had learned that St. Jude's Children's Hospital was very near and dear to my grandparents' heart. So we started every year in December making a donation in their name. And so what we did last year, so December 22nd, my album came out, but on December 15th, I did a show, which is a show I'll be continuing. I'll do it every year. It's called, we called it last year 34 for 34. It was 34 performers in honor of me turning 34. And I'm going to continue this every birthday month. I won't do it on my same birthday day just because it's kind of a stressful show to put on to have 34 performers. But every year I'll do, and however old I turn. So next year or this coming year, I'll be 35. So we'll do a 35 for 35. And we raised money for St. Jude's on that show. And I think every year we'll try to raise money for St. Jude's or other charities as well that are important. But yeah, I was really honored to raise some money for St. Jude's. And we had a lot of cool comics last year. Unfortunately, last year, because of virus, we had to do it virtually. But to be able to have all these comics come out and donate their time, that's the other thing. Donation of money is one thing. To donate your time to a show like that, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to all the comics who donated their time on that show. It meant a lot to me. So yeah, I was very honored to raise some money for St. Jude's. And then for today purposes, I was like, you know what? Let's raise some more money for St. Jude's. So please, please, please donate on their website, stjudes.org/donate. The link is right there. And yeah, thank you for raising awareness for them, Saret.
You're welcome. Thank you, Prateek. And it's also in the description box below, too, so you can just copy and paste the link and just donate.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so you've had an incredible journey with stand-up. And so what inspired you to perform stand-up?
It really, kind of going full circle, but going back to the Lakeshore Theater, again, seeing, Hannibal Buress live, Reggie Watts live, Mark Maron live, all these comics live. And there's something about, because I truly believe, And again, this is going to sound waxing poetic. You know, people are going to be like, "Oh, Prateek, oh, why can't you be more sarcastic and funny?" This is like Passion of the Christ comedy edition. Like, yeah, there was a lot of spirituality in this. There was a lot of you know, there was a lot of what's it called? There was a lot of deep stuff that we talked about today. But you know, the fact of the matter is, uh, comedy can bring people together. I truly believe that. I think we're divided right now as a nation, as a people. And, you know, I've always been about performing. You know, I'll go to Indiana. I mean, maybe not right now. I'm not going to go to Indiana right this second, but I am a believer in, you know, you go to these towns, you go to these VFW halls, you go to these armories, you know, kind of like wrestling, going to these low, you know, kind of crazy places to perform and showing people that, you know, this might be a town where diversity isn't their first priority. I might be the first person of color that these people have seen at these shows. Going to these shows where it's predominantly a white audience, predominantly an older white audience, and maybe even a predominantly conservative white audience, and showing them that, hey, you can laugh at me too. We may disagree politically, but for this 45 minutes to an hour, I've entertained you, and then we can go back to disagreeing later. You know, that's what I like about comedy. I enjoy that. I do jokes about Donald Trump, you know, because as we know, and we've talked about wrestling this whole time, Donald Trump is in the WWE Hall of Fame. I have jokes I do about Trump, and I've done these jokes in a predominantly Trump audience, pro-Trump audience, and they enjoy them. They see that it's the absurdity of Trump. I'm not taking him down as much as they think. So I like that these jokes work for pro-Trump people. Anti-Trump people love them as well. And I like the fact that, you know, for this 45 minutes to an hour, we don't have to fight over politics. We don't have to disagree about things. We can use humor, and we can come together and just be a collection of cells and be a human race for this time period. Because when I was going to Lakeshore Theater, I would go to these shows by myself. You know, I wasn't able to find people in college who wanted to go there. I want to go drink, or I want to blah, blah, blah. So I would go to these shows by myself, to be in a room full of strangers and feel that connection with the Hannibal Buresses and the Mark Marons and the Andy Kindlers and the Doug Bensons and the Greg Giraldos, to feel those connections in the audience. I felt one with that audience, even though I knew nobody in that audience. So that to me is a huge strength of a stand-up comedian, of a live performer. You can tell a joke and have a human connection that's shared with this group of strangers. Not everybody can pull that off. It's only something that happens in the arts. It happens with live performances, live music, live stand-up, live wrestling, whatever. To be able to come together and enjoy something. And I think that's because of what's going on right now. We're not able to really enjoy live performance right now. I think it's unfortunate. I think some of the healing that's going on in the world we can have more healing in the world with more live performances. I do believe comedy and laughter is a good medicine. And so to me, that's what keeps me going. That's what's inspired me to perform is, you know, how can I bring people together at a time when we're divided, you know? And again, we talked about this at the top of the show, you know, about being Asian American. You know, I am of the mind that, yeah, if a young Asian American or a young brown kid or a young Indian kid or whoever sees me and is like, hey, I kind of look like that person. If I want to get into this, how do I start? I'm fascinated by that, and I encourage it. You know, people that I saw that look like me, I saw Aziz back in the day. I saw Hari Kondabolu back in the day, and I would be like, oh, yeah, Paul Varghese. I remember I got to talk to Paul Varghese at that DC Comedy Festival. I said, hey, man, I remember watching your Comedy Central thing in high school. He was like, thanks, man. I'm like, yeah, it really kind of motivated me to get started watching all these different sets and all these different Asian comedians and Indian comedians getting started. So to me, that's definitely part of it. I hope to, you know, be a part of that my stand-up can, you know, inspire someone one day to get started as well. You know, I've had people come up to me and say things like, oh, yeah, how do you tell your parents you're doing stand-up or whatever? And I try to tell these people that, hey, you know, you have to show your parents and your loved ones that you really care about this art form. You care about this. This is a passion of yours, because these industries are not easy to get into, and money isn't always the easiest thing. You're going to be doing this for free. You have to, for comedy, wrestling, art, juggling swords, or whatever you want to do, you got to love it before you're going to get paid to do it. You know, I truly believe that. And so for all these kids out there who are like, oh, what are my parents going to think? You got to show your parents that you are truly passionate about this. And if you show them that, I think they'll come around to it, you know? Now you got to support yourself as well. You got to still have a day job. You got to find a way to make that money so that you can continue to do your craft. But I truly believe that if you're passionate about something and you show that passion and you still maintain this idea of, the stage time that you receive is a privilege, not a right. And I think that's another thing, not to go off on 10,000 tangents, Sareth, but staged, I think a lot of performers out there, they believe this, but some of them, it gets lost that no one is guaranteed to be on stage. It's something that you have to earn, and you have to maintain that earn. You have to keep maintaining that. You're only as good as your last set. And so I think some of that entitlement can get removed if more and more comics continue to remember that, stage time is a privilege. And I think given this past year where stage time was taken away from us just because of what else is going on in the world, I think we should be more grateful for any stage time that we receive. I mean, even this is a form of stage time right now, to be able to talk with you and, spread and have this conversation amongst everybody who's listening and watching. It's a privilege to be here. I truly believe that.
Indeed, and it's so true what you said about your parents. And like, my parents saw me perform once, and I was like, we love you, and we don't get any of these jokes because their English is their second language. It's my second language, and it's like, all right. And so, like, when I told them I was going to go on tour, like a 14-show, 10-date tour, they were like, well, I told them I saved up $300, but my dad threw me an extra 100. And by the end of it, I came back home with $40 in my pocket, and I was like, it's just totally worth it. And when you spoke of like Enterprise, it reminded me, like, I got rear-ended and I had to take a rental car. And so I did my tour from like central, like North Florida, all the way up to like Atlanta, and I did Savannah. And I came back down to Orlando and like just stopped. And then when I took it back to Enterprise, they were so mad that there was so much mileage in like a couple days. They were just like, I'm sorry, but I had to go on tour. And it reminded me of you going all the way out, getting your rental car and just, doing those shows.
The Enterprise rental car in the suburbs, and then having to go. Literally, we get to the scene like, oh, we have to go back to the suburbs. Yeah, and I think you can drop it off at different enterprises now. If someone can tweet at me at the Daily Prateek on Twitter, at Prateek Comedy on Instagram, let me know. Does Enterprise let you go to different locations? Because I still don't know how that works.
Indeed. And what was the feeling like when you first performed stand-up?
When I first performed stand-up, what was it like? So I'm very loud and boisterous on stage, and I still remember my first few times on stage, people literally yelled out, "We can't hear you." I was very soft when I first performed. I remember performing, and I had like a piece of, I was like holding a piece of paper on my first set, like it was like a script, and like you could see the paper shake, Sareth, because I was so nervous. So it took a long, because here was the thing for me, I didn't do like high school plays or anything in whatever, like my first kind of foray into performing and the performing arts. I had done one like stage sketch. It was the South Asian Student Association talent show. I hosted that and did skits for that. That's it. That was my only foray into performing. Otherwise, stand-up was my first foray into performing. So obviously, when people come into stand-up and sometimes they have a faster rise in stand-up or whatever, it's because they've done music or improv or sketch or blah, 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 or whatever. So when you're coming into stand-up without a lot of performance art background, it's definitely going to be an uphill battle. It's definitely going to be harder. So for me, yeah, I think I always love hearing how people first started, because it's like, yeah, there is a struggle starting out, and you are going to suck when you first start out. I think it's only natural. So yeah, I think we all sucked when we started, and I think we can only grow from that first few years. It really is. You see a lot of drop off within the first year of somebody doing stand up, but then it's also like, if they make it the first year, then they'll stick around a few years. And then year 4 or 5 is when you'll see another huge drop off. It's weird. There's always these weird drop off points. It's within your first year, and then you might make it your second and third year just off like, yeah, first year. Then as your third and fourth year come around, then you will see more people drop off and quit. And it really is just about endurance. It's really just about like, can you play the long game in stand up? Can you just stick around and really appreciate your time as a comedian? And I think you see it. You see who sticks around and you see who doesn't stick around. And I think it speaks to that. Who's really passionate about doing it.
Absolutely. And I'm like 5 years consistently, or maybe 6. I started in 2004. So
there you go.
And it's like, it's so true what you said. Like, some people just fall off, and it's just like, I don't know, I'm committed to this, and like, you commit to the bit, and and trust the process. And everyone tells me that. So I'm like, all right, I retired every year, and then like it's a running joke here in Florida, and so like they're like, we're still mad at you, but I'm like, listen, I went on the radio just to say that so I can put cheeks in seats, and I sold out, like I nearly sold out the Orlando Improv, like 280 out of the 300 seats. It was so gnarly, and it was on a Wednesday night.
Your retirement, like it's my retirement show,
Yeah.
which again is that thing from wrestling. Because how many people retire in wrestling and then come back after retirement? You know, so,
Absolutely. Ric
there you
Flair,
go.
Hogan.
Yeah, Ric Flair, Hogan's retired so many times. I'm hoping Undertaker finally stays retired. He's deserved it, certainly. So,
and Sting too, for sure.
Yeah, Sting is back too. He did a street fight recently. Yeah.
Indeed. And other than your EP and LP, what are your favorite comedy specials and records
that other people have put out? Sam Morrill put out a special on YouTube last year during the pandemic. The name is escaping me, but I really enjoy Sam Morrill's last special. Kyle Kinane started in Chicago, but Kyle Kinane, if anyone hasn't checked out Kyle Kinane, I feel like a lot of the Chicago comics know Kyle Kinane, but if you're out there and you haven't listened to Kyle Kinane, I highly encourage it. All his albums are on Spotify, YouTube. Whiskey, Icarus, what is the other one called? I liked his last album better. His debut album, Death of a Party, is that was like homework to me, like when I first started out. Kyle Kinane's Death of the Party album, must listen to. You gotta listen to it. Hannibal Buress's Animal Furnace special is a prolific stand-up special. I don't think I know obviously a lot of people know him now. They might know him for his later stuff, but go back to Animal Furnace. It's a fantastic special. I enjoy John Mulaney's Top Part CD. That's the album. Obviously, he's had more specials since then, but Top Part is his first CD. I'm a big fan of that. Tom Segura's second. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's the one where he's got like for anybody out there, it's the one where he looks like Thriller. He's literally doing it's his face on the Thriller album cover. That's a really good one. George Lopez's Why You Crying, his Showtime special. Unbelievable. If you want like good storytelling and good act outs like Godfrey, but George Lopez doing his thing, I think that one deserves a good watch as well. Bill Hicks's HBO One Night Stand, but also his Revelations album as well. Both of those are great. Bill Hicks is another example of talk about a guy he's being political, he's being deep with his messages, but he doesn't lose the funny. Never loses the funny. It's all about the joke. Bill Hicks, a lot of people think, oh, Bill Hicks, he said fuck and he hated clubs. Bill Hicks, a lot of people don't know this. Bill Hicks started stand-up at 16. He started doing clown college originally. He did like traditional Johnny Carson setup punchline. So sometimes you have to learn the rules before you break them. I think people forget that. Bill Hicks like did classic setup punchline before he became this counterculture comedian. Same with George Carlin too. George Carlin was on the Tonight Show in the 50s, like doing the same straight man, like take my wife, classic jokes that we know, before he became more political and more counterculture. So I think it's important too to learn the rules before you break them. So yeah, all those specials are great. Who else? What's his name? There's a great Chicago comedian, Jeff Asmus, who just put out an album recently too. His is really good. Hari Kondabolu, I mentioned earlier, he's got a couple albums out. But yeah, all these albums are wonderful. Check them all out. That's the beauty. The comedy, the economy of a comedy right now for stand-up is great. There's so many albums out there, so much content out there. Check out all of it. There's so much great stuff.
Indeed. And some of those folks have been on TV and film, and I want to know your favorite sitcom, sketch shows, and comedy films are.
Favorite sitcom, sketch shows. TV film. This one really isn't I'll start with one that isn't even a sitcom. It's a drama, but Breaking Bad is one of my favorite shows ever. I mean, and there's some dark humor on that show as well. You have Bob Odenkirk, who's a sketch master, a sketch legend. He is on that show as well. But Breaking Bad, I've watched that series 3 ways. I've watched it like 3 times all the way through. It's a fantastic show. You pick up little Easter eggs along the way. There's dark humor wrapped up in brilliant dramatic performances. But I love that show. It's fantastic. In terms of sitcoms, I enjoyed Community. That's a fantastic show. I enjoyed Parks and Recreation. It's a fantastic show. There's a show that came out on Comedy Central a couple years ago. I think Nathan has come back later, but it's called Nathan for You. Nathan Fielder. It's kind of like a reality comedy kind of thing. It's kind of semi-scripted, semi-reality where he goes and helps businesses, but then he comes up with these like outrageous like solutions for businesses. one of the funniest shows I've ever seen. Like just the if you like awkward comedy and just like the uncomfortable tension of humor, Nathan, for you. I believe it's on Comedy Central Hulu and it's on HBO Max, but check that out too. I got to throw, I really quick, I have to shout out the Danny McBride, Jody Hill, they're all those shows they did. They did Eastbound and Down. They did Vice Principals on HBO. They did that show about the televangelist, Righteous Gemstones. But yeah, any of those Danny McBride shows, fantastic. And those shows are great because they're not super long. They're like 12 episode seasons or 12 episode series or whatever. So they're doing the British model of now a ton of episodes, but they feel like mini movies, you know. So yeah, all those shows are good. Sketch shows. I know it's the hip answers. Oh, I don't like Saturday Night Live. I love Saturday Night Live. I'm proud to say that. You know, Saturday Night Live, there's still great sketches every week. I'm not watching the show live, but I'll always catch their shows, the best sketches from the show on YouTube the next day. And so they're always putting out good material. There's some fantastic Chicago people that came up in Chicago that are now writing and acting on Saturday Night Live. So shout out to Saturday Night Live for their sketch prowess, if you will. It's a great show.
Indeed, in comedy films.
Comedy films. I'm a mark for. I'll use the wrestling term for. I'm a big mark for. Some of the like Anchorman is a great Will Ferrell movie, but I think my favorite Will Ferrell movie is probably Talladega Nights, Ricky Bobby, the NASCAR movie. I think that movie, a lot of people love it, but I think it deserves an extra bump because it's kind of a political comedy wrapped up in a race car movie. Like it's kind of insane because you have Sacha Baron Cohen's character from Borat act as this kind of French Formula One driver, and then you have like Will Ferrell's like dumb American be like, "Hey, I hate the French. F you, you weirdo French person." So it's like kind of a political cartoon, but not really. It's sort of that xenophobia of America, Southern conservative values of America. You have the corporate element with that. I don't know if I'm speeding up or anything. Hopefully, I didn't cut out or anything, but you have like the dinner scene where they're eating just fast food, McDonald's or whatever. It speaks to the human condition of how much we eat fast food. So yeah, it's a fantastic movie, political, deeper meaning than just being NASCAR. And it's also downright damn funny movie. Like the lines and the banter between John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell, fantastic movie. Blues Brothers, I'm partial to because it was shot in Chicago. It's literally got Blues Brothers has action, it's got romance, it's got comedy, it's got good music. All these blues legends are in it. You have John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, two of the comedy OGs of the game. Fantastic movie. Office Space and 40-Year-Old Virgin are also up there. Office Space, to me, is the quintessential workplace comedy. You would not have Community. You would not have The Office. You would not have King of the Hill, which is also an underrated show too. Shout out to King of the Hill. Shout out to Mike Judge. But Office Space, to me, is a timeless movie about drudgery of work. Who hasn't hated their job? That's a universal premise to build a movie around. So Office Space is up there. And then finally, 40-Year-Old Virgin, Steve Carell, probably one of his dirtiest movies ever. He's not really done. If you look at his film catalog, he hasn't done a dirty movie since. Like he's been pretty much pristine, award-winning movies. But like, yeah, it's this filthy movie, but it's based on such a sweet premise. A guy who just wants to fall in love. We all want to fall in love. So to me, it's this romantic comedy built on a dirty premise. And it's also kind of the pioneering film that helped launch Judd Apatow and Seth Rogen's career. So you wouldn't have that whole Judd Apatow, Seth Rogen enterprise without that movie. So you have to give it up to the original 40-Year-Old Virgin. I can pop in those movies any time of day and laugh at them.
Indeed. And going back to Breaking Bad, I remembered, Bob Odenkirk with the sketches and seeing Lavelle Crawford, and I believe Bill Burr was in there too. So it's just great to see comedians in that show, So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Vince Gilligan apparently Vince Gilligan, the creator of Breaking Bad, he was a huge fan of Mr. Show, and he was watching Mr. Show one day and was like, you know what? Bob Odenkirk kind of fits this role. You've noted, like, it's happened a few times with comedians where a director has watched their stand-up or their comedy thing and is cast because of it. Patton Oswalt got cast in Ratatouille because Brad Bird, the director, was watching his stand-up album. Gabriel Iglesias got cast as a DJ in Magic Mike. I mean, I don't know if you're a big Magic Mike fan or whatever. I don't know if you're a big male stripper fan, but Gabriel Iglesias literally got cast because the director and Channing Tatum are big Fluffy. They're like, oh man, Fluffy is here or whatever. So to me, all these directors and all are fans of comedy as well. And if they can write a role that's specific to your strengths, why not?
Indeed, most definitely. And if you can go on tour with any comedians locally and internationally known, you've done some local tours already. Which comics would you go on tour with? Uh,
I love to do. You had Anthony Bonazzo, Aaron McDavis. I love to tour with them. You had Tyler Ross on. I think Tyler Ross and I were planning on touring, but it just COVID kind of came in the way. I love to go on tour with Tyler Ross. There's a New York comic named Ralph Anthony. We are going to tour at some point as well. Greg Bach from Milwaukee. We are gonna. I'm telling you, if he watches this, we are touring at some point, sir. It's gonna happen. So yeah, I would love to tour with all these people. I can't wait to tour. You know what, Sreth? If you want to tour as well, let's tour at some point whenever things open up. Let's do that.
I'd love that. And I have connections all over Florida, so we can do a Florida tour.
Let's do
And,
it.
and
The Panhandle tour, baby.
absolutely. And some famous comics you'd like to go on tour with?
I mean, God, if yeah, Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle, Dave Attell would be honored to perform with them. Uh, I would love to perform with stand up to Doug Stanhope too. There was a chance. There was a slight chance. I know people are like, oh fuck, he's lying. No, there was a chance before COVID happened. He was scheduled to come to town, and the booker was like, yeah, I might pair you up with Stanhope. It could have happened. We don't know. So yeah, I would have loved to perform with him. Uh, there was a comic named Matt Broussard that I was scheduled to perform with before COVID. I love to do shows with him because I love Matt Broussard. Matt Broussard's another underrated comic you guys should check out. Very intellectual. He does a whole Conan bit about his mother being a gynecologist, which is insane. So yeah, I love people who do stand up bits, like stand up late night sets about one topic. It's insane. So yeah, I love to tour with all those people. Yeah, Maz Jabrani, I would love to do more shows with him as well. Fantastic, and Godfrey too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And speaking of Godfrey, you mentioned Patrice O'Neill praised him, and you spoke of Greg Giraldo too, and they were known for their roasts as well. And if you can get roasted by five comedians, past and present, which comedians would I get roasted by?
Dom Rickles. I mean, it's pretty much going to be past because unfortunately, but yeah, I would love for Greg Giraldo to tear me a new one. Don Rickles, Patrice O'Neill. Obviously, I think that's Patrice O'Neill and Don Rickles. That's a point of pride if you get roasted by them. I'd love for Colin Quinn, Jim Norton, these guys to also give a crack at me. And Big J Okerson's a big roast guy too. I would love for him to tear me a new one. So yeah, these are my picks for sure.
Indeed, most definitely. And what do you see?
How could I forget? How can I forget Jeff Ross? You got to include Jeff Ross. He's the roast master general too. I would love for him to tear. I gotta say his name as well. How could I forget?
Absolutely. And where do you see your comedy journey in the next 5 years?
I'd love to put out another album. I'd love to do something for TV. Obviously because late night shows don't have audiences, we can't have a late night stand-up set yet. I know Jimmy Fallon and I think Conan have had stand-ups in COVID, but I hope that continues. Love to do a set on late night TV. Love to work on some TV and film stuff. And then as from a stand-up goal, just do more touring.
Absolutely. And you answered some of my questions for the next one. And you've done acting and sketch and so forth. And which other forms of comedy would you venture off into, like improv? You mentioned you wanted to do acting, and you've done acting, but directing, etc.
I would love to direct. I would love to also do some documentary filmmaking as well. How Chris Rock came up with like that Good Hair documentary later in his career. I have a few ideas for documentaries that I'd like to pursue. I think I want to wait right now, hold off, but that's something I'd like to do that a lot of people don't know. I'd like to pursue documentary filmmaking. I used to play piano when I was younger, which I don't know if a lot of people watching this might know. I've not really made that very public, but yeah, I used to play piano. So I'd love to like make beats down the road too at some point, get maybe not be a full on musical star, but producer, I'd love to get involved in that from a performance angle. Acting is always fun. That's the kind of the challenge right now is there's no open mics for acting. You know what I mean? Like there's no way to kind of keep fresh. So I do this web series, which is on my YouTube channel. It's called Neurotic by Nature. It's literally me ranting for 1 minute outside in nature. And it's been a way for me to kind of, keep that kind of acting kind of going a little bit. It's like a way to kind of practice acting, if you will. You know what I mean? So it's great. It's nice to have these it's again, like we talked about, finding that way to keep the stage time fresh, finding that way to keep everything fresh. So for me, it's how can I, even with everything going on, with all these restrictions, finding a way to still perform and stay fresh, and I'm finding the way to do that. So that's all we can hope for, sir.
Absolutely. And what is your favorite joke a comic has written?
Favorite joke a comic has written. You know what a really good one was that I haven't, of all the people I've mentioned so far, I haven't talked about is Gary Gulman has a joke on his Conan set, and it's on one of his albums about how the states got abbreviated, and he mentions a documentary where it's about these team of panelists coming together to decide how to abbreviate the states, and it devolves into an argument, and it devolves into this absurd story. Turns out there is no actual documentary about that. Gary Gulman just made that up. So you know what? Big ups to Gary Gulman for his how the states became abbreviated joke. That's a really good joke. I implore anyone out there to look up the Conan version of that set and then the album version of that joke. It's a really good joke. It's like a 7 to 8 minute thing that he does, and it's all made up. There is no documentary like that. So I just thought it was a great swerve wrestling term that he pulled off, So
Absolutely. And what experience would you like your audience to take with them after a set is over?
from my set, I would like the audience to take it with it. You know what? If this is like, a conservative crowd or a crowd where maybe they don't have a lot of diversity, I would like them to take away that, you know what, you saw a person of color, maybe you haven't seen too many people of color. Remember that people of color are just like you. That's my takeaway for people when they're, in an environment, you're Indiana, some parts of Florida environments. But for other just general audience takeaways, I really want people to just be like, you know what, did I have fun? During this hour, 45-minute show or whatever. Yeah. Did you have fun? Is that your takeaway? Takeaway that you had fun. Takeaway that, you know what? I have other things in common with other people too. I do jokes with my family. The album Nick and Shield is about family. So I would want that someone takes away from that, hey, this guy has a wacky family. You know what? I have a wacky family too. Maybe we have more similarities than differences. That's kind of the point of, the album that came on. Some of my material about family is like, showing, again, illustrating these things that, like, you know what, we're not so different after all. And so that's another takeaway too, is we're not so different after all. And hopefully you take that away from my comedy. And hopefully you took away from this as well, that we're not so different after all.
Absolutely. And so, Prateek, you were my guest. You were nominated 5 times from 5 different comics.
Oh, wow. 5 times. You'll have to tell me off air who all nominate me.
Absolutely. You're like the Booker T.
There you
going back to Bad Bunny and so
Bad Money. Yeah. 5 people. I knew a couple people. I didn't know it was 5. So that's awesome. Shout out to all those guests who nominate me. I got 5 times. That's crazy. So thank you, guests.
Absolutely. And so, so with that being said, the stand-up speakeasy is like it's like the Prohibition, the Roaring 20s. You gotta know somebody to know somebody to join the club. It's a secret society of stand-up comics, if you will. And so it's just it's gonna go public eventually. So but the episodes are all on my YouTube. But so it's not so secret. But with that being said, Prateek, which comics would you like to see from Chicago or wherever you've met in the coast to coast you'd like to see on a future episode? Which ones would you like to go?
Hell's yeah. So I'm glad that you're giving me the opportunity to go beyond Chicago as well. But I'll pick some names from Chicago and beyond as well. So Chicago, we'll start with Chicago-based people. Matt Drufke he is an OG of the Chicagoland game. This man has performed all over the country. Fantastic performer. He puts on an award show in the Chicago suburbs called the Burbies. He does a stand-up award show. This man is super supportive of the Chicagoland community. So you need to have Matt Drufke on. This man you thought I've had some stories. This guy has 10,000 stories. So you got to get Matt Drufke on. Also got to have Mike Maxwell on. He's a fantastic. Mike Maxwell is also in the Chicagoland area. He's got a family, but this man, he can perform for any type of room. Clean room, conservative room, liberal room, kids room, married room. This man has done it all. So you got to get Mike Maxwell in there. Okay. Another name is we got to have Greg Bach. I know he's a Milwaukee comic, but Greg Bach is a prolific stand-up and comedian, good friend of mine. But this man has produced shows for Milwaukee Comedy, the Milwaukee Comedy Festival, and now he currently runs and co-owns a comedy club. So he has a wealth of knowledge, and like I said earlier, he is one of the nicest people I've ever met in comedy. So you got to have Greg Bach on. Absolutely. And then I think you got to throw in, if you're willing to go outside of the Chicagoland area, Samuel Bade, who I mentioned earlier, 10,000 days of comedy in a row. This man, like, he treats comedy performances like a science. Like, he is incredibly prolific about his stand-up performances. He's performed in every type of room. He's performed in Russia. He's performed overseas as well. You want to talk about stories? This man has stories. So I would definitely have Samuel Bate on. And then my final name, I'm going to choose, because I don't want to be here all night. I'll give you like 10,000 names. We got to wrap this up at some point. But the final name I'll give you, he is an OG of the game. He is based in Chicago, but he's all over, because he was working with W. Kamau Bell on the CNN show. But his name is Dwayne Kennedy. This man he's literally done everything. He's been in How High. He's been on Seinfeld. He's been on Letterman. He's been on Comedy Central. He's been on Conan. He's done every show imaginable. He is, you want to talk about the OGs of stand-up. You want to talk about like someone who, underrated in the comedy community, but a legend, an absolute legend. I look up to him so much. If you can get Dwayne Kennedy on, I think that would be a wonderful guest for you. And I think you're going to learn a lot from Dwayne Kennedy. And check out his stand-up. If you haven't checked out Dwayne Kennedy's stand-up before, he's incredibly prolific, incredibly underrated, in my personal opinion.
Indeed, most definitely. I'll be sure to reach out to all those fine folks, and hopefully I get granted those interviews. That'd be rad.
That would be great, yeah.
Indeed. So, with that being said, I have your Facebook, Instagram, TikTok scrolling on the bottom there, your Twitter,
Yeah.
your PayPal, Venmo, your website, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, all scrolling on there. And so I want to, with these interviews, I want to raise funds and raise followers for you, so that way you can get into those A rooms like Zany's again and Laugh Factory and Caroline's after this whole pandemic is over, because that's my goal. And I want to put money in your pockets too, and as well as St. Jude's, because it's just a lot of comics in certain states, their comedy places are closed, and so this is like the next best thing. And so make up for all that, all those bounce checks and stuff from those bars.
Getting paid in chicken tenders a lot.
Absolutely. So with that being said, Prateek, are there any final words you'd like to give out to the audience at home?
Yeah, just everybody needs to stay safe and figure out what makes you happy in life. For especially at this time right now where things are tough, find that thing that makes you happy. Find the people that make you happy. If there's somebody who's troubling to you, you don't need to go near that person. Find the community and the things you like to do that make you happy. And if it's an uphill battle to do that thing, and it doesn't have to necessarily be stand-up. It could be sword juggling. It could be fire breathing. It could be taking pictures of German tanks. Whatever you want to do that makes you happy, find a way to do it, and also find a way to support yourself while you do it, because it might be an uphill battle to get paid. So find what you love to do and find a way to support yourself, because life is too short to just do something you don't like doing. That's what I would like to end on. And good on you, Surratt, for doing this. This is a really cool show. I hope everyone enjoyed this, and I hope everyone donates to St. Jude's. Check out the album Nick and Sheila's Kid. If you want an hour of comedy, Nick and Sheila's Kid, Read the Room is the LP. Thank you.
Awesome. And I've always wanted to ask Chicago and this. What's the difference between Chicagoland and Chicago?
So Chicagoland is the neighboring suburbs of the city. So like I was born in Lombard, Illinois, which I would say is 45 minutes outside the city of Chicago. So I always think it's when some of these, suburban people are like, "Oh, I'm in Chicago." No, you're in the suburbs. That's where Chicagoland comes into play. You know what I mean? So that's a way for people to say they're from Chicago, but not actually be in the city if they're not in the city, because I think it's confusing. The Improv, they say Chicago Improv. No, it's in Schaumburg. It's in the Chicagoland area. So it's just a way to classify everything and make it easier too.
Thank you so much for clarifying that, because I was so confused with all the Chicago and Chicagoland stuff. And I'm sorry, Chris Santiago. I know that you made Prateek's album cover, which is fantastic, but we beat your record by a couple of minutes, so it's for the longest stand-up. So now that we beat his record, we're ready for Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan, whenever you want to reach out to us, we can be on your podcast now, because we got that endurance.
Hells to the yeah! I'm breaking records, Surratt, and happy to have you. We broke the record together. Where's the Guinness Book of World Records on that?
Absolutely, this is so gnarly. Thank you so much for being my guest, and we'll after we get off air, I'll share you the names that nominated and stuff. But I have a cool spreadsheet just to, like,
Oh
reach out
shit,
to all the comics.
that's
So
awesome.
I'm
And
well
shout
organized.
out to Santiago too for having the he had the title until we had it. So we took the title, but he was a good title holder until we got there. So thank you, Chris. Surratt, thank you, and thank you everybody.
Indeed. Now we're the wrestlers that have titles, and so now we're the 6-time champions. Like,
6-time champion, baby. Woo! Ric Flair.
Awesome, everyone.
Woo!
Be safe, take care of each other, and we'll see you on the next episode of Stand Up Speakeasy.